At my son's wedding, just as the guests were rising and the music began to swell, our family photographer stepped beside me with his camera still raised. Without looking at me, he whispered, "I need 90 seconds. Now." My smile froze. I followed him to a quiet corner of the garden where he turned the camera screen toward me. The photo showed my daughter alone inside the VIP room, standing over a stack of papers she was never supposed to touch. Then he handed me one loose page, and everything I thought I knew about that day began to fall apart. Thank you for being here with me today. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment and tell me, have you ever had to make an impossible choice to protect your family? Your perspective helps others feel less alone. Just a quick note, some details in this story are fictionalized for reflection. The message is what truly matters. I woke at 6 in the morning, 2 hours before my alarm, staring at the empty space where my wife should have been, knowing this was the last day I could pretend my daughter wasn't trying to destroy me. The Atlantic stretched gray and infinite beyond the master suite windows, the same view Constance and I had watched together for 38 years. I reached for the photograph on her nightstand. My nightstand now, though I'd never moved it and touched the silver frame the way other men might cross themselves. She smiled back at me from our 30th anniversary party, radiant in emerald green, her hair swept up the way she wore it when she wanted to feel elegant. That was 4 years ago, back when laughter came easily, and she could still breathe without thinking about it. When Hayes gets married, Vernon, but she'd said, that night champagne making her bold, that's when I'll know we did something right. 2 years gone, and I still turn to tell her things that happened during the day, still saved up stories for a listener who would never hear them. I set the frame down and opened the top drawer of the mahogany nightstand. Beneath her reading glasses, which I couldn't bring myself to move, and the bookmark still holding her place in a novel she'd never finish, sat the small leather notebook. 23 days of documentation. 23 days of watching my daughter maneuver pieces into position while pretending I didn't notice. I had known for 4 weeks. This morning I had decided to let it end. The notebook pages chronicled what a stranger might dismiss as coincidence. June 2nd. Celeste asking about the Cole Family Trust Amendment timeline. June 8th, Curtis Blanchard, our family attorney for 25 years, suddenly unreachable for a week. June 15th, Dr. Upshaw calling to confirm an appointment I'd never scheduled. Each entry in my own tight handwriting, each one a small betrayal, carefully recorded. I slid the notebook into the inner pocket of my vest where it would rest against my heart all day. Some men carry photographs. I was carrying evidence. The shower ran hot enough to hurt the way I'd learned to prefer it after Constance died. Physical sensation proving I was still present, still capable of feeling something. I dressed slowly, charcoal suit, ivory shirt, the platinum cufflinks Hayes had given me last Christmas engraved with Dad in his physician's precise handwriting. In the mirror, I looked like exactly what I was supposed to be today. Vernon Lockwood, 70 years old and 3 years into widowhood, father of the groom, retired CEO still standing straight. What the mirror didn't show was the man who'd spent 30 years watching people reveal themselves in the space between what they said and what they meant, who'd built a commercial real estate empire by knowing when someone was bluffing and when they'd already shown their hand. Celeste thought I didn't know. That was her first miscalculation. At 7:30, I found her in the estate foyer, a vision of filial devotion in a navy gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. She spotted me descending the stairs, and her face transformed pure daughterly warmth, the smile she'd inherited from Constance along with those devastating green eyes. Dad. She crossed the marble floor in 4 strides, reaching up to straighten my already straight collar. You look distinguished. Mom would have loved this. She would have loved seeing Hayes happy. I said, letting her fuss. Celeste produced a boutonniere from seemingly nowhere white rose exactly right and pinned it to my lapel with steady hands. CFO hands. 38 years old and already running the financial operations for a Fortune 500. My daughter had always been meticulous. It was one of the things I'd been proudest of back when I thought precision and integrity went together. Dad, you just enjoy today, she said, stepping back to examine her work. I have everything handled. Everything. The emphasis on that second everything was so slight another man might have missed it. I didn't. I watched her move through the morning, like a conductor orchestrating a symphony. She corrected the florist's table arrangements with surgical precision. She intercepted the caterer with a question about timing that somehow became an instruction. She poured my coffee black, 2 sugars, exactly how I'd taken it for 50 years, and set it on the sideboard within reach. And she checked her watch. Once while adjusting the orchid centerpiece, a quick flick of her wrist. Again, while giving instructions to the catering manager, barely a glance. A third time while handing me the coffee, her eyes dropping to her wrist for perhaps half a second, before returning to my face with that perfect smile. I counted, 3 times in 10 minutes. People who check their watch that often aren't keeping track of time, they're waiting for something specific. "You've been so attentive these past weeks, sweetheart," I said, testing the waters. "Is everything all right?" Her smile never wavered. "Everything's perfect, Dad. I just want Hayes' day to be flawless." "Of course," I said, and sipped my coffee. But I'd seen it. The micro expression before, the smile locked into place, calculation dressed up as concern. Celeste wasn't worried about Hayes' wedding. She was counting down to something else entirely. How does a father count the minutes until his daughter tries to rob him blind on his youngest son's wedding day? The same way he spent 30 years counting votes before board meetings, reading body language across negotiating tables, knowing that the most dangerous opponent is the one who thinks you're not paying attention. In the reflection of the foyer's antique mirror, I caught Celeste checking her watch again. 4 times now. Her lips moved slightly, not speaking just the ghost of numbers. She was keeping a timeline in her head, something precise enough to require constant verification. I knew what she was counting toward. I'd known since I'd gotten my own copy of the documents she thought were secret, since I'd traced the offshore account she thought was hidden, since I'd watched Curtis Blanchard's body language crack during what should have been a routine trust review. Celeste was waiting for midnight. She just didn't know I had been counting too. In 3 decades of boardroom negotiations, I had learned one thing: people who check their watch that often are waiting for something specific, usually a deadline. And what I was counting was about to walk through that garden door with a telephoto lens and the kind of evidence that ends families. I set down my coffee and smiled at my daughter. The smile I'd used in 100 acquisitions, the one that said I had no idea what was really happening. Shall we go see if your brothers are ready?" I asked. Celeste checked her watch one more time. "Absolutely, Dad," she said. "Let's make this a day to remember." I found the boys in the East Garden, where Constance used to cut roses every Sunday morning, and for one perfect moment I could pretend this was just a wedding day. Hayes stood among the white blooms in his tuxedo, 30 years old, and radiating the particular joy of a groom who had found exactly the right person. He'd met Leora during his residency. She was the hospital attorney who defended one of his patient care decisions. Constance would have adored her. "Dad," Hayes turned when he heard my footsteps. "Can you believe this is actually happening? Mom would have loved this morning." "She would have," I said. The garden air smelled like roses and fresh-cut grass, exactly the way it had for 30 years. Thane stood a few feet away, 35, and built like the architect he'd become, precise angles, careful measurements. But his shoulders carried tension I recognized from board meetings, right before bad news landed. "Morning, Dad," he said, eyes distant. "You all right, son?" Thane glanced at Hayes, then lowered his voice. "Dad, last week there was a weird transaction on one of my linked accounts. Some kind of wire transfer flagged by my bank's fraud detection. You know anything about that?" The question landed like a stone in still water. "Tell me about it," I said. "Almost 200,000 routed through an overseas account, then reversed within 48 hours. The bank said it looked like someone was testing the authentication protocol." Thane ran a hand through his hair. "I thought maybe you were doing some estate planning thing, but—" "I'm not," I said quietly, "but I'll look into it." Thane had just handed me the last loose thread without knowing it. Someone had used his identity to test a transfer mechanism. In the background, Floyd Caldwell moved through the garden with his camera gear, a 65-year-old man who still carried himself like the photojournalist who'd spent 2 decades in conflict zones. He'd been photographing family events for 8 years, ever since he'd decided he was done watching people die through a viewfinder. Our eyes met for half a second. He gave me the smallest nod, the kind of signal you learn when words can get you killed. He knew, I knew, neither of us spoke. "Dad, you sure everything's okay?" Hayes asked. "You look—" "I'm fine. Just thinking about your mother." I paused. "She planted these roses the year you were born, you know. Her hands in the soil every weekend until the cancer made it impossible to kneel." Hayes' expression softened. "I remember. I was 12, maybe 13. She'd sit in that chair and tell me which ones to deadhead. She was very specific about deadheading, I said, and we both smiled. Floyd appeared at my elbow, then moving fast and quiet. No preamble. "Vernon," he said, low and urgent. "I need 90 seconds. Now." I followed him to the secluded corner where the garden wall created a blind spot from the house. "I was setting up for candid shots," he said. "Used the telephoto to catch Celeste through the VIP room window about 20 minutes ago. Her expression, it wasn't a sister at her brother's wedding. It was predatory." He pulled out his camera, clicked through the display. The image showed Celeste at the antique desk papers, spread before her pen in hand. Her face was caught in profile, focused, calculating, hungry. She was signing something. Thick document, maybe 10-12 pages. Then she stepped outside for a phone call. Left the door ajar for 30 seconds. I looked at him. "You went inside." "Old habits." He didn't apologize. "Found this under the table. Looks like a page that missed the stack." He handed me a single sheet of paper. The header read, "Durable Power of Attorney in Vernon William Lockwood Principal." My hands went cold. Below the header sat dense legal language about incapacity and fiduciary authority and immediate transfer of control. But what stopped my breath was the attachment stapled to the corner, a psychiatric evaluation form describing moderate cognitive decline, impaired financial judgment, episodes of confusion regarding recent events. At the bottom, in familiar handwriting, Dr. Quincy Upshaw, M.D., dated 4 days ago. A durable power of attorney grants immediate control. No court, no hearing, no chance to fight back. Dr. Upshaw had been my physician for 10 years. He'd walked me through Constance's final illness with compassion I'd never forgotten. He'd cleared me for international travel 3 months ago. And he'd signed a document declaring me mentally incompetent. "Verna," Floyd's voice came from very far away. I read the evaluation again. The words didn't change. Patient exhibits marked deterioration in executive function. Family members report increasing paranoia regarding financial matters. Recommend immediate intervention to prevent self-harm or financial exploitation. Family members, plural. Celeste hadn't done this alone. "Yeah, how many pages did you see in that stack?" I asked. "Couldn't tell exactly. Thick enough to be comprehensive. 10 minimum, maybe 12. A full durable power of attorney document, not a draft. A complete instrument ready for execution with a falsified medical evaluation attached to justify immediate activation." If Celeste got my signature on that document, or if she'd already forged it, she could walk into any bank, any brokerage, any property office and take control. Immediately. With Dr. Upshaw's evaluation, as proof I was too mentally impaired to object. "Where is she now?" I asked. "Last I saw heading toward the ballroom to check floral arrangements." I looked at Floyd. He looked at me. Neither of us said her name. My own doctor, the man I'd trusted with my health for a decade. His signature was right there declaring me unfit to manage my own life. But we both knew exactly where I needed to go, next down into the dark, past the kitchen, past the hallway, where Hayes' childhood photos still hung down to the wine cellar, where Celeste thought her secrets were safe. I told Floyd to stay visible and keep shooting. Then I went downstairs past the kitchen, where caterers were plating hors d'oeuvres, past the hallway where Hayes' childhood photos still hung down, into the dark where my daughter had hidden the truth behind my favorite vintage. The wine cellar stairs creaked under my weight, the same protest they'd made for 30 years. The temperature dropped with each step until I reached the bottom 58 degrees, the perfect climate for aging wine, and apparently for storing betrayal. The air smelled of oak barrels and old stone, familiar and foreign, all at once. Floyd had sent me an encrypted message 10 minutes ago, 3 words and a number, behind 87, center. The 1987 rack stood against the north wall. Bottles arranged in perfect rows, the way Constance had insisted they should be. That was the year we'd bought this place, the summer she was pregnant with Celeste. The summer we'd stood on the bluff, and she'd said, "Our children will grow up with the ocean." I pulled bottles from the center section, Bordeaux, mostly some of them worth more than most people's cars. Behind the third row, my fingers touched something that wasn't glass. A manila envelope sealed with tape wedged into the gap between the rack and the stone wall. My hands were steady when I opened it. 30 years of board meetings had taught me how to stay calm when everything was breaking. The document inside ran 12 pages. Durable power of attorney in the matter of Vernon William Lockwood. each page dense with legal language, each clause more devastating than the last. I read standing in the cold dark, my breath visible in the dim light from the single bulb overhead. Page 1. Grant of authority to Celeste Marie Lockwood as appointed agent effective immediately upon principal's incapacity as determined by attached medical evaluation. Page 3. Explicit authorization to liquidate all trust assets without prior notice or consent. Page 5. Authority to transfer equity holdings in their entirety to designated offshore entities. Page 7. Power to assign, sell, or license all 12 pharmaceutical patents held by the Cole Family Trust. Page 12. Binding arbitration clause requiring all disputes to be resolved in the Cayman Islands under Cayman law. $280 million. 12 patents that generated $40 million in annual licensing revenue. The New York commercial properties. The Montana ranch where Constance and I had celebrated our 25th anniversary. All of it transferable with a single signature, mine. Except I'd never signed this document. The signature line at the bottom of page 12 sat empty waiting. 2 witness signatures already appeared above the principal line, Curtis Blanchard, and a notary stamp. I didn't recognize Edna's arrangement, no doubt. Under New York law, ADPOA required only my signature to become fully executable. Every other formality was already in place. But Celeste had already obtained everything else she needed, the falsified psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Upshaw declaring me mentally incompetent, the legal framework to execute the transfer of the offshore accounts to receive the funds. All she lacked was my signature, and based on the midnight deadline she kept checking, she had a plan for that too. 1987, the summer, Constance was pregnant with Celeste, the summer we stood on this property for the first time, and she said, "Our children will grow up with the ocean." I folded the document carefully and slid it back into the envelope. Then I pulled out my phone. Dr. Quincy Upshaw answered on the first ring. His voice sounded like he'd aged a decade since our last appointment. "Vernon." "Quincy," I said quietly. "I got your email. I needed to hear your voice before I acted on it." Silence on the line. Then a sound that might have been a sob or might have been a cough. "I'm sorry," he said. "God, Vernon, I'm so sorry." "Tell me what happened." He took a shaking breath. 6 weeks ago. She came to my office after hours, walked right past my receptionist like she owned the place. She had $80,000 in cash in a briefcase and a file folder with documentation of a prescription error I made in 2019. Patient recovered fine, no harm done, but I'd transposed 2 dosages in the electronic system. A mistake, just a mistake. She threatened to report it. She said she'd file a malpractice complaint contact, the patient's family leak it to the medical board and the press. She said I'd lose everything I'd spent 40 years building. His voice cracked. And then she showed me the psychiatric evaluation form and said all I had to do was sign it. Just one signature, just confirm what her observations had already documented. "You signed it." I signed it. He was crying now, not hiding it. I took the money and signed the form, and I've been sick about it every day since. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't look at myself. 2 days ago, I sent you everything the encrypted email, with the audio recordings of her threats, the photos of the cash, my own confession. "I got it," I said. "And this morning?" "This morning I called the New York State Medical Board and self-reported the whole thing. My license is suspended pending investigation. I'll almost certainly lose it permanently." He paused. "But I'm prepared to testify. I'll give you everything depositions, court testimony, whatever you need. She threatened me into signing that evaluation, and I have proof." Dr. Quincy Upshaw would lose his license. He knew it, accepted it, and chose to testify anyway. "Quincy, stay by your phone," I said. "I may need you on a call with the DA's office before tonight." "Whatever you need," he said. "Vernon, I know this doesn't fix what I did, but it's a start," I said and ended the call. I stood in the wine cellar holding the DPOA and listening to the muffled sounds of wedding preparations 2 floors above. Somewhere up there, Hayes was probably adjusting his tie. Leora was probably laughing at something her bridesmaids said. Celeste was probably checking her watch again, counting down to midnight. And I was standing in the cold dark with a 12-page document that proved my daughter had spent 6 weeks building the infrastructure to steal everything I'd spent 30 years creating. Sometimes the people who help you most are the ones paying the highest price for their own mistakes. I filed that thought away and climbed back upstairs. Because if Celeste had blackmailed the family doctor, she'd need someone with access to move money, and Thane's name kept echoing in my head like a warning bell. I came back upstairs through the service entrance, past the florists and catering staff, who saw nothing unusual in an old man carrying a glass of water to his study. That was the advantage of being underestimated. The first floor study looked exactly as I'd left it at 5:30 that morning, laptop closed on the mahogany desk, Constance's reading chair by the window, the framed photograph of all three kids at Hayes' medical school graduation. Normal, peaceful, a lie. I opened the laptop and pulled up my private banking portal. The one Celeste didn't know existed, the one I'd set up 3 years ago, when I started teaching myself digital forensics because I was tired of paying consultants to explain what my own money was doing. The $80,000 payment to Dr. Upshaw had originated from an account I recognized immediately. Thane Lockwood Architecture, LLC. Corporate operating account, established 2019 when Thane opened his firm. My son's name, my son's business, my son's signature on a fraudulent payment to blackmail our family doctor. Except Thane had mentioned the strange transaction this morning in the garden, confused, concerned, completely unaware, which meant someone else had accessed his account. I dug deeper. The wire authorization showed dual signature approval, one from Thane's business manager, one from an account holder listed as V. Lockwood Family Trust Oversight. Family Trust Oversight. An authority I'd granted Celeste 7 years ago when she'd taken over CFO duties, a co-signatory role on certain family accounts to streamline estate management. I'd meant to revoke it when I retired. I'd forgotten. She hadn't. Celeste had used an old administrative authority coupled with Thane's corporate account to create a paper trail that pointed directly at her brother. When this conspiracy unraveled, when authorities started following the money, the first name they'd find would be Thane's. She wasn't just stealing from me. She was burning down her brother's life to cover the smoke. A knock at the study door. Floyd entered without waiting for permission, the way he'd been doing for 8 years. "You've found something," he said, pulling out his camera. "Been reviewing overnight surveillance shots. Look at this." He clicked through to an image time-stamped 11:04 p.m. the previous night. The study. This study. The desk lamp on my laptop open, and Celeste sitting in my chair with her back to the window, fingers on the keyboard face illuminated by the screen's glow. "She was in here while you slept," Floyd said quietly. "Covering her tracks," I said, "making sure the digital trail led to Thane." Floyd nodded. "She's framing him, systematically." I closed the laptop. "I need to see what else she's planning. Real time." "North Terrace," Floyd said. "I can set you up with the telephoto. VIP room has a clear sightline from there." 5 minutes later, I stood on the North Terrace with Floyd's camera mounted on a tripod, the telephoto lens dialed to maximum magnification. Floyd handed me his iPad already running a lip-reading application he'd used in conflict zones when audio surveillance wasn't possible. "Point the camera, let the app do the work," he explained. "It's not perfect, but it catches most of it." Through the lens, the second-floor VIP room jumped into sharp focus. Celeste stood near the window, arms crossed, face animated with argument. Across from her, a man I'd known for 25 years. Curtis Blanchard, 62 years old, our family trust attorney since before Hayes was born. The man who'd drafted Constance's will with tears in his eyes because he'd loved her too. The man who'd held our youngest son at his christening and told me I was blessed. Now he stood in that room shaking his head while Celeste spoke. I watched the iPad screen as the app processed her lip movements, rendering text in real time. "Thane has no idea. The transfer looks clean." Curtis's response came slower, the app struggling with the angle. "This is wrong. I can't." Celeste stepped closer, and even without audio, I could see the shift in her body language, predatory, threatening. More text appeared. "You signed the papers. You're already complicit. If this falls apart, you go down with me." Curtis shook his head again. "Not a refusal, not disagreement, submission. How do you hold a man accountable when you can see with your own eyes that he's drowning?" "He doesn't want to be there," Floyd said, watching over my shoulder. "No," I agreed. "He doesn't." Curtis pointed toward the door, a gesture that looked like dismissal, but read as desperation. Celeste said something else the app couldn't catch, then walked out, leaving Curtis alone in the frame. For perhaps 10 seconds he stood motionless. Then he sat down heavily in the chair by the window and put his head in his hands. "That's not conspiracy," Floyd said. "That's coercion, which means he can be turned." I thought about Curtis Blanchard's history with our family. He'd managed Constance's estate with meticulous care. He'd advised me on every major trust decision for 2 decades. He'd sent flowers on the anniversary of her death last year with a handwritten note that said, "Still miss her." Whatever Celeste had on him, whatever leverage she was using, Curtis Blanchard was not in that room by choice. "What's his weak spot?" Floyd asked. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I will." Through the telephoto lens, I watched Curtis stand up, straighten his tie, and walk toward the door with the posture of a man heading to his own execution. Whatever Celeste had threatened him with, it was powerful enough to make a man with 25 years of ethical practice sign documents he knew were fraudulent. But coercion has a breaking point. Everyone does. You just have to find the right pressure. Curtis Blanchard had drafted Constance's will. He'd been at our wedding. He'd held Hayes at his christening. And now he was in that room doing something he clearly did not want to do. That made him useful. But if Curtis was being forced, I needed to know exactly what leverage Celeste held over him before I could make him choose me instead. And I needed to clear Thane's name before my son became collateral damage in his sister's war. I handed the camera back to Floyd. "Find out everything you can about Curtis Blanchard's life in the last 6 months. Financial troubles, professional complaints, personal scandals, anything Celeste could use." "Already on it," Floyd said. I looked back through the window. The VIP room sat empty now, but the ghost of that conversation hung in the air like smoke. Celeste had made a mistake. She'd assumed Curtis would stay broken. She'd assumed I wouldn't see him breaking. She was wrong on both counts. Floyd brought Thane to my study at 10:30, and my son walked in wearing his groomsman's tie loose at the collar, looking like a man who hadn't slept enough and was trying not to show it. "Dad." His eyes moved from me to Floyd, standing just inside the door. "Floyd said you needed to see me. Is everything okay?" I closed the study door and turned the lock. The sound of the bolt sliding home made Thane's shoulders tense. "Sit," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. He sat. Floyd positioned himself by the door, arms crossed silent. I turned my laptop screen toward Thane and pulled up the wire transfer record I'd been studying for the past 40 minutes. "This transaction happened from your corporate account 4 days ago," I said. $80,000 to an account registered to Dr. Quincy Upshaw. Look at it." Thane leaned forward, eyes scanning the screen. His expression shifted from confusion to focus as he read the details: sender account, routing numbers, authorization codes. "I don't..." He stopped, pulled out his phone, opened his banking app. His thumbs moved fast, navigating to his architecture firm's corporate account. He scrolled through the transaction history once, then again, then a third time. "It's not here," he said quietly. "My account shows nothing. The balance is correct, no irregular transfers, nothing flagged." "Because she used back-end corporate authorization," I said. "The kind you don't see unless you're looking at the bank's server logs, not your app interface." Thane's face went deathly pale. Then, as understanding hit a deep crimson, flooded his neck and cheeks. His fists clenched on the armrests. "She used my name," he said, voice tight and controlled. "She's setting me up to take the fall for this." "Yes." "How much of this did you know?" "It's 4 weeks," I said. "I've known something was wrong for 4 weeks. I've had proof for about 3 hours." Thane's jaw worked. I watched him process the information, watched the architect's mind that had designed buildings across 3 continents, calculate angles and load-bearing points in a completely different kind of structure. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I needed to know how deep it went before I brought anyone else in," I said, "and because I needed to give her the chance to stop." "She's not going to stop." "No," I agreed. "She's not." Thane stood up, paced to the window, back to the desk. His hands opened and closed, the physical manifestation of rage looking for direction. I stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. He stopped moving. "I need your help," I said quietly. "Not your anger, not yet. Can you give me that?" Thane had been 8 years old the day I taught him that anger without direction is just noise. 27 years later, he still remembered. He stared at me for a long second. Then he nodded once, sharp and controlled. "What do you need?" I gestured back to the chair. He sat. I sat across from him. "First, I need you to access your corporate system's administrative logs. Not the banking app, the actual server access records. I need documentation of every unauthorized login in the past 8 weeks. Timestamps, IP, addresses, everything." "I can do that," Thane said. "My IT manager can pull those within an hour." "Do it yourself," I said. "Don't involve anyone else yet. Can you access the back end directly?" Yes, I have root credentials. Good. Second, I need you to gain control of the ballroom's multimedia presentation system. The projector audio, everything. I assume Celeste has the vendor's contact information. Ich besees en Amorix, mijn lister. She's been coordinating with the AV company all week, Thane confirmed. I can call them, say there's been a change in the presentation schedule. They'll give me admin access. I'm listed as secondary contact on the contract. Call them before noon, I said. Tell them the estate owner has authorized a schedule change. I'll send written confirmation to their contact email right now. I typed 3 lines on my phone, property owner authorization, my signature, my direct number for verification, and sent it before Thane finished dialing. Thane pulled out his phone, made a note. His hands were steady now, the rage channeled into something useful. Anything else? Yes. When you pull those corporate access logs, I need you to trace every financial transaction that touched your account in the past 60 days. Not just the Upshaw payment, everything. If Celeste used your credentials once, she may have used them multiple times. That looking for a pattern, Thane said. Exactly. He nodded. What are you not telling me? I hesitated. This isn't just about stealing money. She's framed you as the financial architect of the entire conspiracy. If this falls apart before I can document her involvement, the evidence trail leads directly to your name on multiple fronts. This is what Celeste had calculated on, that I would protect one child by sacrificing the other. Thane absorbed this without visible reaction. How bad? Bad enough that you'd need a very good attorney and probably lose your professional license while the investigation played out. And Hayes doesn't know, I said. And he won't, not today. Not on his wedding day unless it becomes absolutely unavoidable. Thane looked at Floyd, then back at me. You have a plan. I'm building one, I said, piece by piece. When do we move? Tonight, after the ceremony during the reception. Celeste is working toward a midnight deadline. I intend to make sure she never reaches it. Thane stood. I'll have the logs within 2 hours. Multimedia control by noon. Is there anything else? I looked at my son, 35 years old, carrying the weight of his sister's betrayal with the same precision he'd carry structural calculations for a 50-story building. No questions about what happens after tonight, I asked. You'll tell me when I need to know? Thane said. Right now you need data and access. I can provide both. He didn't ask me how long I'd known. He didn't ask me why I hadn't told him sooner. He just said, what do you need? That's the thing about Thane, he's always been the steady one. I just never told him often enough. Floyd unlocked the door. Thane walked out without looking back, already pulling up his phone to start the work. I sat down at my desk and pulled the small leather notebook from my vest pocket. 23 days of documentation, 23 days of watching my daughter build a conspiracy. But underneath the notebook, pressed against my heart since 6 this morning, was the envelope I'd been avoiding. Constance's handwriting on the outside, open when you know what you have to do. I'd known since the wine cellar. I'd known since Dr. Upshaw's confession. I'd known since I saw Thane's name on that wire transfer. And what I needed next was to understand exactly how deep this conspiracy ran, which meant I needed to open the one envelope I'd been carrying over my heart since this morning. The 3 of us convened in my study at 10:45, the door locked and wedding preparations continuing outside our crisis. Inside, we were building a different kind of architecture entirely. Thane spread his laptop across the desk alongside Floyd's camera and my own documentation. The room felt smaller with purpose filling it. Corporate server access logs, Thane said, pulling up a spreadsheet. I pulled everything from the past 90 days. Look at this pattern. He turned the screen toward me. Highlighted rows showed 14 separate accesses to the master trust document repository, all outside business hours, all between midnight and 3 in the morning, all authenticated under Thane's administrative credentials. 14 times, Thane said, voice tight. She accessed the trust files 14 times. Every single entry is unauthorized. And she was meticulous, never the same night of the week, never a predictable interval. Someone taught her how to avoid triggering automated alerts. What was she accessing specifically? I asked. Patent assignment documents, real estate transfer protocols, the trust amendment process flowcharts. He scrolled through the log. She was mapping the entire structure, learning exactly which documents needed to be modified and in what sequence to execute a clean transfer. Floyd set his phone on the desk screen up. I reached out to a contact at the AP who still covers white-collar crime. He made some calls. Apparently, there's been quiet talk in Curtis Blanchard's law office for the past 2 months. Paralegal overtime, unusual document prep for a client who insisted on meeting only after hours. 8 weeks, I said. At minimum, Floyd confirmed. This wasn't improvised. The DPOA was professionally drafted, reviewed, refined. We're looking at a 2-month operation involving legal counsel's financial planning, systematic document theft. 8 weeks of planning deserved a response that took at least as long, but I'd given myself 4 and midnight was coming, whether I was ready or not. Thane picked up his phone. I'm calling Priscilla Norwood. Priscilla Norwood was my personal attorney at Sullivan and Cromwell, 52 years old, and sharp enough to have made partner before 40. I'd retained her 3 years ago, specifically because she specialized in estate defense and elder financial abuse. Constance had insisted, saying, we needed someone who understood how families destroy each other over money. Thane put the call on speaker. Priscilla answered on the second ring. Thane Lockwood, she said, recognizing the number. This is unexpected. Everything all right? No, Thane said. We have a situation. Elder financial abuse, wire fraud, identity theft. My father may need you before midnight tonight. Pause. When Priscilla spoke again, her voice had shifted from cordial to tactical. Is Vernon safe right now? Yes, Thane said. But his daughter has been building a durable power of attorney conspiracy for 8 weeks. We have documentation of unauthorized system access, falsified psychiatric evaluations, and fraudulent wire transfers using my corporate credentials. Yeah, how much are we talking about? Everything, I said, leaning toward the phone. The entire trust. She's planning to execute tonight. Vernon, Priscilla said, I need you to listen carefully. Do not sign anything. Do not verbally agree to anything. If she approaches you with documents, photograph them and send them to me immediately. Already done, I said. Good. I'm clearing my schedule. I'll be on standby from 6 p.m. onward. You have my emergency line, Basopasis. Ekori readings das inspire. I do. Use it the second you need me. And Vernon, if this goes sideways, if she moves faster than anticipated, call 911 first, then call me. Understand? Oh, this is a mopeketeo. Understood. She ended the call. Floyd looked at me. You have a good attorney. Constance insisted, I said. Thane closed his laptop. What else do we need before tonight? I need to check something, I said, standing. Give me 15 minutes. I left them in the study and climbed the stairs to the master suite. The wedding preparations had spread throughout the house, but this room remained untouched, mine alone, the way it had been for 2 years. The wall safe sat behind Constance's portrait, the one painted for our 25th anniversary, when she still looked like herself, and not like someone being eaten from the inside by disease. I moved the frame aside, entered the combination our wedding date, and opened the steel door. Inside sat my operational notebook, some cash, Constance's jewelry, and a sealed envelope with her handwriting on the outside, open when the family needs it most. I'd been carrying the notebook all morning, the envelope I'd been avoiding. I broke the seal. 4 pages handwritten in the script I'd known for 38 years, dated 3 months before she died, when she could still hold a pen without her hands shaking. Vernon. It began. If you're reading this, it means I was right to worry. Celeste came to see me privately at the hospital last week. She asked very specific questions about the trust execution structure, who held signature authority. What would happen if you were declared incompetent, whether the boys had independent access to funds? I told her nothing useful, but the questions themselves told me everything. I sat down on the bed. Our daughter loves us, Constance wrote. But she loves control more. I've watched her since she was small, the way she needs to manage every variable, the way she can't tolerate uncertainty. It's made her brilliant in business. It will make her dangerous in family matters. Watch over Thane and Hayes. The account information below is for them alone. Celeste doesn't know it exists. Attached to the final page with a paperclip, routing numbers, account codes, access credentials. A Cayman Islands bank. $35 million established in Constance's name 2 years before she died, designated as irrevocable trust for Thane Lockwood and Hayes Lockwood only. She had known. 2 years in the ground, and Constance was still the most prepared person in any room. I folded the letter and put it in my breast pocket, close to where it hurt most. Constance had always known where to aim when she needed me to listen. Then I went to find Leora, Because if Constance had suspected Celeste enough to hide money from her, I needed to know what else my future daughter-in-law had been watching. The bridal suite was on the second floor down the hall from the VIP room, where all of this had started, and I knocked once before Leora opened the door, still holding her veil. "Vernon," she said, surprise flickering across her face. At 28, Hayes's bride carried herself with the particular confidence of someone who'd argued cases in front of judges twice her age and won. Hospital attorneys sharp enough to defend my son's medical decisions against malpractice claims, smart enough to make him laugh when the ER broke his heart. "I need a word," I said, "private." She glanced back into the suite where her bridesmaids were arranging flowers and champagne glasses, then stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind her. "Is everything all right?" she asked. Hayes is fine," I said, "but I need to ask you something." Before I could form the question, she spoke. "You got my message, didn't you?" The hallway went very quiet. "I got it," I said carefully. I needed to know who else was watching before I responded. Leora's shoulders dropped slightly, relief mixed with something heavier. "I wasn't sure if you'd received it, or if you'd think I was, overstepping. Tell me what you saw." She glanced down the hallway, verifying we were alone. 3 weeks ago, I was working late on a corporate filing for the hospital. Around 2 in the morning, I got a security alert on my laptop. Someone on my home network was accessing an external portal. I thought it was a breach at first, so I traced it. And it was Celeste. She was logged into the Cole Pharmaceuticals corporate portal using CFO credentials, accessing a directory marked Trust and Estate Documents. I watched for maybe 10 minutes. She downloaded at least 15 files. "Why were you on the same network?" "Hayes and I have been staying at her guest house for the past month, while our apartment lease transitions," Leora said. "Same Wi-Fi network. I saw everything." She was 28 years old, about to walk down the aisle into a family quietly tearing itself apart, and she'd been carrying this alone for 3 weeks. "Why didn't you tell Hayes?" I asked. "Because it's his wedding week," she said simply. And because I couldn't verify what she was doing, just that she was doing something at 2 a.m. that looked wrong. I took screenshots, encrypted them, and sent them to you anonymously. I figured you'd either already know or you'd investigate. "I knew something was wrong," I said. "I didn't know you were watching." "I'm marrying into this family," Leora said. "That means I protect it even from itself." Hayes chose better than he knew Leora had the spine to protect a family she wasn't even part of yet. "Before I sent you that email," Leora continued, "I found something else. Do you want to see it?" "Yes." She opened the bridal suite door, gestured me inside. The bridesmaids had moved to the adjacent bathroom, their voices and laughter muffled through the closed door. Leora's laptop sat open on the vanity among makeup brushes and hairspray. She pulled up a file directory, clicked through to an email thread. "I copied the files she downloaded before I sent you the alert," Leora explained. "Most of it was trust documentation, amendment protocols, signature authority chains. But this one," she opened an email. This one she sent 4 days ago. The header read, "To Al Rashid, Capital Partners, Dubai, from Celeste Lockwood, subject re-patent acquisition opportunity." I read the body text once, then again. "Power of attorney documentation, expected execution by Monday morning Eastern Standard Time. 12 pharmaceutical patents available for immediate acquisition at 40% below current market valuation. Confidential transaction offshore settlement preferred. Please respond by Sunday evening to confirm interest and proposed terms." Attached a spreadsheet listing every patent my father had filed, every compound I'd spent 30 years developing, and licensing every piece of intellectual property that generated $40 million in annual revenue, each one priced for liquidation. "She's not just stealing the money," I said quietly. "No," Leora agreed. "She's dismantling everything and selling it for parts. Not theft, dismantlement, liquidation, complete erasure, sold to the highest foreign bidder." I thought about my father, who'd started with a single patent in 1962 and built it into a portfolio that helped fund breakthrough treatments for 3 different diseases. I thought about the researchers who still collected licensing fees, the patients whose medications existed, because we'd chosen to license rather than sell exclusively. Celeste had already sold it all to strangers in Dubai, who would strip it for immediate profit and maximum extraction. "The reply came yesterday," Leora said, scrolling down. "Al Rashid confirmed interest. They're offering $210 million for the complete portfolio cash settlement within 72 hours of transfer authorization. $210 million, 40% below market value for 12 patents worth $350 million minimum. A fire sale to foreign investors who would immediately resell or fragment the portfolio. Everything my father built, everything I spent 30 years growing, everything I'd hoped to pass down to Hayes and Thanes Celeste had already sold it to strangers who would strip it for parts. Thank you for showing me this, I said. Leora closed the laptop. I'm sorry I didn't come to you directly 3 weeks ago. You did exactly right, I said. The encrypted message gave me time to verify, without tipping her off. If you'd confronted me openly, she might have seen it. What are you going to do? Yeah, stop her, I said simply. Leora looked at me for a long moment. Hayes doesn't know, yet does he? Not yet, not until after the ceremony, if I can help it. Good, she said. Let him have this morning. He deserves that much. I thanked Leora. I closed the door quietly behind me. I was done hoping I was wrong, and if she was selling my life's work to Dubai, I needed legal clarity on exactly how to stop her, which meant calling the one person who could tell me if I still had any moves left. The North Garden was empty at noon, all the caterers on the south side preparing lunch service, and I walked to the far hedge where no one could overhear before I called Priscilla Norwood. She answered on the first ring. Vernon, what do you have? Everything, I said, the complete picture. I briefed her standing behind the dense hedge-line phone pressed to my ear, laying out the conspiracy piece by piece, the falsified psychiatric evaluation, Dr. Upshaw's blackmail confession, Thane's forged wire transfer signature, Curtis Blanchard's visible coercion, the Dubai patent sale offer for $210 million. Priscilla listened without interrupting. When I finished, silence stretched for perhaps 5 seconds. How much time until her deadline? She asked. Midnight, 12 hours. And she needs your signature on the DPOA to execute any of this. According to what Floyd found, yes. The document requires my voluntary signature to activate. Then here's what you need to understand, Priscilla said, her voice shifting into the mode I recognized from depositions. Under New York General Obligations Law, Section 5-1501B, a voluntarily executed durable power of attorney is immediately binding upon signature. She can walk into any financial institution tomorrow morning and start liquidating assets. My hand tightened on the phone. But, Priscilla continued, she cannot force you through court proceedings within 24 hours. An Article 81 guardianship petition requires a hearing. An ex parte emergency order is virtually impossible to obtain. By midnight, she'd need to prove imminent harm and get a judge to sign off, which won't happen on a Saturday night with the evidence she has. So her entire plan depends on making me sign willingly. Exactly, which means her leverage is psychological, not legal. She's going to threaten, you manipulate you, possibly try to coerce you with the falsified medical evaluation. But she cannot legally compel your signature. I thought about the DPOA hidden in the wine cellar, the midnight deadline Celeste kept checking, the careful staging of this entire wedding day as cover. Let her come to you, Priscilla said. 4 words, Vernon. Don't confront her. Don't tip your hand. Let her make the approach. Let her deliver the threats, and if you can get it on camera, elder financial abuse, attempted grand larceny, conspiracy to commit fraud. I can file a motion to void the DPOA immediately and have her in handcuffs before sunrise. 30 years of hostile takeover bids had taught me one truth. The person who needs the deal always loses. One more thing, Priscilla said. I pulled the offshore account records Blanchard forwarded. Al Rashid's wire transfer window closes at midnight Eastern Standard Time on Sundays. Miss that window, and the Dubai deal collapses entirely. She loses her buyer and her only exit from $47 million in debt. That's why it has to be tonight. She needs my signature, I said slowly. I don't need to give it. Now you're thinking like a lawyer, Priscilla said. I'm going to prepare trust amendment documents naming Thane and Hayes as sole beneficiaries with an independent trustee. I'll have a notary on standby. The second this goes south, you call me and we execute a new trust structure that writes Celeste out entirely. Understand? Om die basic unbe despond based. Understood. And Vernon, when she comes to you tonight with that DPOA, I need you to stay calm. Don't react. Don't show anger. Just refuse to sign and let her reveal exactly how far she's willing to go. The more desperate she gets, the more evidence we capture. I can do that, I said. I know you can. Call me the second you need me. She ended the call. I stood in the north garden, listening to the sound of wedding preparations filtering through the hedge, musicians tuning instruments, caterers setting tables, the ordinary sounds of a celebration that would serve as cover for something much darker. My phone buzzed, text from Thane, VIP cameras killed at 6 a.m. Curtis's tablet, Floyd and I are handling it. I read it twice. Celeste had researched the venue's security architecture beforehand. She'd used Curtis Blanchard's administrative credentials to disable the VIP room surveillance at 6 this morning, hours before anyone else was awake. She thought she'd covered every angle. She thought the room where she planned to coerce my signature would be dark, unwatched, impossible to verify. I texted back, "What's the solution?" Thane's response came 30 seconds later. "Floyd's installing off-grid camera now. Independent system. We'll own the footage." I walked back toward the house, entering through the service door and climbing to the second floor. The security alcove sat at the end of the east hallway, a small room where the estate's camera feeds displayed on mounted monitors. Floyd and Thane stood inside Floyd, holding a device no larger than a button, Thane reviewing something on his laptop. "Show me," I said. Floyd held up the micro camera. "Wireless encrypted transmission independent power source. I'm installing it in the VIP room's corner molding. It'll capture everything audio-video full coverage." "Legal chain of custody," I asked. "That's where you come in," Thane said, turning his laptop toward me. "Property owner consent. If you sign this form authorizing surveillance on your own property, we can transmit the feed directly to Hampton's PD without a warrant. Owner consent provides sufficient legal basis under New York law." I read the form. It was simple, direct. Vernon Lockwood, owner of the property located at the address, hereby grants consent for video and audio surveillance of the VIP suite for the purpose of preventing and documenting potential criminal activity. I signed it on Thane's laptop using the trackpad signature function. "It's sending it to Priscilla now," Thane said, hitting send. "She'll forward it to the police with her formal request for monitoring." Floyd pocketed the camera. "I'll have it installed in 10 minutes. By tonight, that room will be the most documented space in the Hamptons." She killed the estate cameras, thinking she'd gone dark instead. She'd walk straight into mine. "One more thing," Floyd said. "I've been reviewing the candid shots from this morning. You need to see who was inspecting the notary station at 7:15. He pulled out his camera, clicked through to an image. The photograph showed a woman I'd known for 11 years, standing at the small table in the library where the notary would witness signatures later tonight. Her posture was wrong, not casual, not curious. Operational. I signed the consent form Priscilla faxed to my phone and sent it back in under 90 seconds. By the time Celeste walked into that room tonight, we would own every second of it. She thought she'd disabled my eyes. She had no idea I'd just opened new ones that led straight to the police. But if Floyd had captured someone else inspecting the notary station like an operative, I needed to see exactly who else was moving pieces on this board. Floyd checked in at 1 o'clock with a photograph sent to my phone, and he didn't need to explain what he'd seen. The picture explained itself. The image showed the outdoor terrace where the reception would be held later tonight, specifically the small table being set up for the marriage license notary. A woman stood beside it, 58 years old, with silver hair pulled back in the kind of severe bun that says efficiency over aesthetics. Edna Blanchard, Curtis's wife. The woman I'd known for 11 years, who'd sat at my Thanksgiving table and cried at Constance's funeral. But she wasn't standing like a guest admiring the setup. She was inspecting it with operational precision, one hand touching a pen to test its placement, her eyes tracking the document layout angles, her posture suggesting she was charting sightlines of the room the way a general charts a battlefield. I zoomed in on the photo. Edna's expression was focused, clinical, utterly devoid of the warmth I'd seen at family gatherings. This was someone closing a deal. 20 years as a high-tier investment banker, structuring complex mergers and acquisitions. Edna Blanchard could dismantle a corporate entity in her sleep, strip it for parts, and restructure the remains before lunch. She'd retired 3 years ago with enough money to never work again, supposedly to travel and enjoy life with Curtis. Celeste is the executor, I thought. Edna is the architect. Everything clicked into sharper focus. The professional legal drafting of the DPOA, the sophisticated offshore account structures in the Dubai email, the systematic timing of every piece. This wasn't Celeste improvising out of desperation. This was Edna applying 2 decades of hostile takeover expertise to the problem of extracting maximum value from a family trust. Edna Blanchard had sat at my Thanksgiving table 11 years running, cried at Constance's funeral, and now she was inspecting my son's wedding venue like she was closing a hostile acquisition. I texted Floyd back, "Keep her in frame whenever possible. Don't approach." His response came immediately, "Understood." I pocketed my phone and climbed to the 3rd floor where the groomsmen were supposed to be getting ready. The suite door stood ajar. Inside, Hayes was somewhere else, probably with Leora, but Thane sat on the edge of a chair with the posture of a man who'd been holding something in too long. "If Thane," I said. He looked up. His face was pale drawn. "Can we talk?" he asked. "That's why I'm here." I closed the door and sat in the chair across from him. For perhaps 10 seconds, neither of us spoke. "There's something I didn't tell you this morning," Thane said finally, "about Celeste." "Tell me now." He took a breath. 4 months ago, she came to me privately, said she had temporary cash flow issues, something about a deal that fell through, and she needed bridge financing until her next quarterly bonus came through. She asked to borrow money. How much?" $200,000, Thane said quietly. "My entire savings from the architecture practice. Everything I'd built over the past 6 years. I kept my expression neutral, and you gave it to her. That she's my sister," he said, as if that explained everything. Maybe it did. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to create family drama. She said it would be repaid in 60 days, 90 maximum. She gave me a promissory note, which she defaulted on. Completely. After 90 days, I started asking. She stopped returning my calls. When I did reach her, she said the deal had fallen through worse than expected, and she needed more time. Then she stopped responding entirely." He looked at me. "That's why I was so shaken when you showed me the wire transfer this morning. She'd already taken everything I had, and then she used my name to steal more." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thane, it was never your job to protect her from the consequences of what she chose to do. I should have told you sooner. You're telling me now. That's what matters. But I was calculating. 200,000 from Thane, 80,000 to blackmail Dr. Upshaw, 210 million from the Dubai patent sale, and underneath it all, the reason for this entire desperate gambit. $47 million in total debt, with creditors filing a massive lawsuit Monday morning. I'd found that detail buried in the financial records Leora had sent me. Loan documents, margin calls, leverage positions that had collapsed. Celeste had been playing with money she didn't have, making bets that failed, and when the bills came due, she'd turn to the only asset large enough to cover it, the family trust. $47 million is the kind of hole where you stop looking for ladders and start calculating how many people you can pull down with you. "She's desperate," I said to Thane. "People make terrible decisions when they're desperate. Does that excuse it?" "No, but it explains it." Thane stood, walked to the window overlooking the garden, where guests were beginning to arrive for the 2 o'clock ceremony. "What are you going to do?" "That's what needs to be done," I said. He turned back to face me. "You've known longer than this morning, haven't you?" I met his eyes. 4 weeks. "Why didn't you stop it sooner?" "Because I wanted to be wrong," I said simply. "I wanted to give her the chance to choose differently. And she didn't." "No," I agreed. "She didn't." Thane nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Keep doing what you're doing. Access logs, multimedia control, surveillance coordination. And Thane, when this is over, that 200,000 comes back to you first, before anything else." "I don't care about the money anymore," he said. "I know, but you're getting it back anyway." I left him in the groomsmen's suite and walked back downstairs. The wedding ceremony would start in less than an hour. Guests were arriving, musicians were warming up. Everything looked perfect. She had taken Thane's life savings, she had forged his signature, and still it wasn't enough. $47 million is a very deep hole, deep enough that I understood, for the first time, that there had never been a version of this day where Celeste came to me and asked for help. She had calculated that stealing was faster, and if she'd calculated that stealing was faster than asking, I needed to show her exactly what I'd calculated while she was busy planning her theft. At 2 o'clock, I called the 3 of them back into my study and locked the door. It was time they knew what I had known for a month and why I had waited. Thane and Floyd stood by the desk. On my laptop screen, Leora appeared via secure video link from the bridal suite, her wedding dress visible behind her. "What's going on?" Thane asked. "The truth," I said. "All of it. I sat down in Constance's reading chair, the one where she used to review contracts and tell me when I was being too cautious or not cautious enough. The leather still smelled faintly of her perfume 2 years later. 4 weeks ago, I received an alert from a financial intelligence source I've maintained since retiring. Celeste had massive margin calls coming due leverage positions that had collapsed private loans she'd taken using her CFO position as collateral. The total exposure was $47 million. Thane went very still. I engaged Priscilla Norwood that same day. I continued. Not to defend against something that might happen, but to prepare for what I already knew was coming. I've spent the past 4 weeks building the counter plan you've been executing today. You knew, Thane said quietly. This whole time, you let us think you were blindsided. I hoped I was wrong about her, I said. I was prepared to be right. Floyd leaned against the desk, arms crossed. What was the counter plan? Documentation first. I needed to know the full scope before I could stop it. Every unauthorized access, every forged signature, every co-conspirator. If I'd confronted Celeste 4 weeks ago with partial information, she would have adjusted, hidden the evidence, and tried again later. So I watched, I documented, and I gave her every opportunity to make a different choice. What choice? Leora asked from the screen. I pulled up a file on my laptop, turned it so they could all see. Bank records showing a separate account, offshore substantial. Your mother's estate account, I said, looking at Thane. Constance established it years ago for critical family matters. After she died, it sat untouched. The balance is $49 million. Thane stared at the screen. I had the money, I said simply. $47 million ready to deploy. If Celeste had come to me, if she had simply walked into this room at any point in the past 4 weeks and said, Dad, I'm in trouble, I made mistakes, I need help, I would have cleared every cent of her debt. No questions, no judgment, just help. Constance always said, the hardest gift to give your children is the space to fail on their own terms. I'd given Celeste 4 weeks of that space, and she'd used every second to sharpen the knife. She chose theft over asking, Thane said. Yes. Why? Leora asked. If you would have helped her if the money was there, why wouldn't she just ask? Because asking means admitting failure, I said. Asking means vulnerability. Asking means accepting that she's not as perfect as she's spent 38 years convincing everyone she is. Stealing maintains the illusion. If she succeeds, no one ever knows she failed. If she fails, I paused. Well, she calculated that wouldn't happen. Floyd spoke for the first time. When did you know for certain she wouldn't stop? 2 weeks ago, I said, when she approached Thane to borrow his savings and defaulted immediately. That's when I knew this wasn't desperation searching for solutions. This was calculation. She was testing how much she could take from how many people before pulling the final trigger. Thane sat down heavily in the chair across from me. I should have told you when she asked. You did what family does, I said. You trusted her. That's not a mistake, Thane. That's what makes you different from her. What happens now? He asked. Now we wait, I said. The ceremony begins in 45 minutes. Celeste will be there playing the perfect sister. Edna and Curtis will be there playing the loyal family friends. And somewhere between now and midnight, Celeste will make her move. She'll try to coerce my signature on that DPOA, probably using the falsified psychiatric evaluation as leverage. And when she does, Leora asked, Floyd's camera will capture every word. Priscilla will be standing by with the trust amendment documents, and I will give Celeste one final chance to choose differently. If she refuses, I stopped. Then the choice is made. The study clock chimed 2:15. 45 minutes until Hayes said his vows, and I still didn't know if his sister would be in handcuffs or at the altar when he did. Does Hayes know any of this? Leora asked. No, I said, and he won't unless it becomes unavoidable. Today is his wedding day. He deserves that much. He deserves to know his sister is trying to destroy his family, Thane said. He'll know, I said quietly. By midnight everyone will know, but not before he says his vows. Not before he has this one moment that's supposed to be perfect. Leora nodded on the screen. I'll keep him focused on the ceremony. He won't notice anything's wrong. Thank you, I said. Thane stood. What do you need from us in the next 45 minutes? Stay visible. Act normal. Thane, you're a groomsman, be with Hayes. Floyd covered the ceremony like it's the only thing that matters today. Leora be the bride Hayes chose, and all of you. I looked at each of them in turn. Remember that whatever happens tonight, we gave her every chance. They filed out one by one. Leora's video connection closed. The study fell silent. I sat in Constance's chair and pulled out the letter she'd written me, the one warning me about Celeste. Her handwriting looked the way it had when she was healthy, before the disease had taken her precision. The question had never been whether Celeste would try. The question had always been whether she would stop. She had answered that question every day for 8 weeks. Now it was my turn to answer it. And the ceremony beginning in 45 minutes would be the stage where every answer, hers and mine, would play out before 200 witnesses who thought they were just attending a wedding. At 3 o'clock, the string quartet played the first notes, and 200 people rose to their feet. 2 different ceremonies began at exactly the same moment. The East Garden looked the way Constance had always imagined it would, for a wedding white roses climbing the arbor baby's breath in crystal vases along every row, the Atlantic stretching infinite and gray beyond the bluff. 200 guests in summer formal wear, standing in neat rows of white wooden chairs, all turning toward the garden entrance, where Leora would appear any second. I stood at the altar beside Hayes, watching my youngest son try not to fidget with his cufflinks. He looked exactly like I had, on my wedding day, that particular brand of terrified joy that only comes once the moment before your life changes and you're grateful and terrified in equal measure. "You okay?" I whispered. "Absolutely not," Hayes whispered back, and his smile was so wide I thought his face might break. Thane stood on Hayes's other side as best a man solid and calm. Floyd moved through the crowd, with his camera capturing candid moments, guests, smiling, children, fidgeting the ocean wind, catching someone's hat. The music shifted. Everyone turned. Leora appeared at the garden entrance in a dress that caught the afternoon light, her father beside her, and Hayes made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I put a hand on his shoulder and felt him steady. She walked down the aisle between the rows of white chairs, and I watched 200 people see exactly what Hayes had seen. 6 months ago, someone brilliant and kind and strong enough to love a man who brought emergency room trauma home every night. Constance would have loved this moment, the Atlantic behind them, white roses everywhere, Hayes looking terrified and joyful, in equal measure the way only grooms do. But from my vantage point at the altar, I could also see the front row. Celeste sat 3 seats from the aisle, wearing a navy dress that probably cost more than the flowers. Her smile was perfect big sister, radiating joy, exactly the expression 200 guests would expect. But her eyes moved. Quick glances to the right, toward Curtis Blanchard, who sat 2 seats over. Curtis kept his gaze locked on his shoes. His hands gripped his knees, white-knuckled, the posture of a man forcing himself to stay in his chair. Beside Curtis, Edna Blanchard sat with perfect posture, hands folded primly in her lap, but her right index finger tapped against her left hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. A subtle rhythm that looked like nervousness, but read like calculation. Counting down minutes, counting down hours. The officiant began. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." 2 conflicting layers of reality occupied the exact same sacred space. In one layer, a family celebrated love. Hayes and Leora exchanging vows they meant, with every fiber, guests dabbing tears the ocean, providing the perfect backdrop. In the other layer, a conspiracy executed its final movements toward a midnight deadline, Celeste monitoring her co-conspirators. Curtis fighting visible panic. Edna counting down the hours until they would corner me in the VIP room and demand my signature on forged documents. "I, Hayes, take you, Leora, to be my wife," my son said, his voice clear and strong, despite the tears streaming down his face. 2 rows away, Celeste's smile never faltered, but her eyes flicked to her watch. Quick, practiced, checking the time. 5 hours to midnight. "I promise to love you." Leora said, her hands holding Hayes's, "to stand beside you, to build a life with you from this day forward." I felt my throat tighten. This was real. This was genuine. Hayes had found someone who would protect him the way Constance had protected me, someone who would send encrypted warnings to his father when she discovered his sister logging into trust files at 2 in the morning. The officiant smiled. "By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Hayes kissed Leora like they were the only 2 people in the world, and 200 guests erupted in applause and cheers. Floyd's camera shutter clicked rapid fire. Thane clapped Hayes on the shoulder, grinning. I applauded with everyone else watching my son and his new wife turn to face the crowd, both of them beaming. Celeste stood with the rest of the guests clapping, smiling, throwing rice, as Hayes and Leora walked back down the aisle. She looked like the perfect sister, the perfect family member, the perfect wedding guest. But when Hayes and Leora passed her row, Celeste's hand dropped to her side and her fingers found her watch again. Another quick check, another calculation. Edna leaned toward Curtis, whispered something. Curtis's face went a shade paler. Love and betrayal, vows and conspiracies, joy and dread, all occupying the same 60 feet of sacred ground, separated only by 2 rows of white wooden chairs. The ceremony ended, guests began filing toward the cocktail terrace. Hayes and Leora disappeared with the photographer for formal portraits. Thane caught my eye across the crowd, gave me the smallest nod. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Both ceremonies, the wedding and the counter-operation, moving forward in perfect parallel. I stood at the altar for a moment after the crowd dispersed, looking at the empty chairs and scattered rose petals. The string quartet had shifted to cocktail music. Waiters appeared with champagne trays. Laughter and conversation filled the air. Normal, beautiful, exactly what a wedding should be. Except, I'd watched Celeste check her watch 4 times during the 30-minute ceremony. I'd watched Curtis grip his knees so hard, I thought he might break his own fingers. I'd watched Edna count down the hours with her index finger, like she was conducting a symphony only she could hear. Hayes said, "I do," with a smile I will carry to my grave. 2 rows back, his sister was counting down the hours, and I was standing between them, holding both truths at the same time. But the ceremony was just the opening act. Cocktail hour was where Celeste would start moving the final pieces into position, and I needed to capture every word. The reception moved to the cocktail terrace at 4:30, and I positioned myself near the bar, close enough to the east corner to watch what I needed to watch, far enough away to look like I was simply enjoying the evening air. Guests mingled with champagne glasses and hors d'oeuvres. Hayes and Leora made their rounds greeting family and friends with the particular glow that newlyweds carry. Floyd moved through the crowd, with his camera capturing moments that looked spontaneous, but were anything but. I watched Thane drift toward the terrace's edge, where Celeste stood with Edna, both of them surveying the crowd like generals assessing a battlefield. Thane approached casually, his phone in his jacket pocket, where I knew the recording app was running. He had activated it 5 minutes ago with a simple tap, legal under New York's one-party consent law, as long as he participated in the conversation. "Celeste?" He said naturally enough that nearby guests wouldn't notice anything unusual. "Have you seen the seating chart? I can't find my name anywhere." Celeste turned smile automatic. "It's on the board by the entrance. You're at table 4 with the cousins." "Thanks," Thane said, then pretended to adjust his tie while staying within conversational range. Celeste turned back to Edna, voice dropping to a whisper that carried just far enough. "Curtis needs to stop shaking. It's one signature." Edna's response was quieter, controlled. "Make sure the notary is in position by 8. 8 o'clock. She'd just told us exactly when she planned to strike, and she had no idea we'd captured every syllable." Thane's phone buzzed an alert I'd sent him via our secure app, giving him the excuse to step away naturally. He glanced at the screen, frowned slightly as if reading bad news, and moved toward the garden. I watched him disappear around the corner, knowing he was already transmitting the audio file to Priscilla. 4 minutes later, my phone vibrated. Text from Priscilla. "Admissible. Clean recording, participant present, open space, no expectation of privacy. We have premeditation with specific timeline, 8 p.m. 3 hours until Celeste walked into the trap she didn't know I'd set." I sipped my scotch and watched Curtis Blanchard standing alone near the library door, holding an untouched glass and looking like a man waiting for sentencing. At 5:15, I walked over to him. "Curtis," I said quietly. "A word." He flinched like I'd struck him. "Vernon?" "Inside," I said, gesturing to the library door. He followed me into the first-floor library, the room where Constance used to read to the boys when they were small. I closed the door and turned the lock. Curtis stood in the center of the room, still holding his untouched scotch. His hands shook. I pulled 3 printouts from my jacket pocket and laid them on the mahogany desk. "It's your first document," I said. "Server log showing the command to disable the VIP room cameras at 6 this morning. Executed from your tablet using your administrative credentials." Curtis's face lost all color. "Second document. Transcript from lip-reading analysis of your conversation with Celeste in the VIP room yesterday. You were shaking your head, not agreeing, submitting. His hands started to tremble harder. Third document, New York Rules of Professional Conduct. Rule 8.4, Attorney Misconduct. I assume you're familiar. The glass slipped from Curtis's hand and hit the carpet without breaking scotch, soaking into the antique Persian rug Constance had bought in Istanbul. Curtis. I said, my voice dropping to the quiet register I'd used in boardroom negotiations when I needed someone to understand exactly how serious the situation was. I've known you 25 years. Tell me what she has on you. He stood silent for perhaps 10 seconds. Then he broke. 2009, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I took $85,000 from a deceased client's estate. The family never noticed. I needed it for... He stopped. It doesn't matter why, I took it. And Celeste found out. She was doing a summer internship at my firm, 22 years old, already sharper than half my partners. She found the discrepancy in the estate reconciliation records. Curtis sat down heavily in one of the reading chairs. She came to my office, closed the door, and told me she'd keep it quiet as a personal favor to the family. All I had to do was remember that she'd helped me when I needed help. Curtis had drafted Constance's will. Baptized Hayes sat at my table for 2 decades, and Celeste had owned him since she was 22 years old. She waited, I said. 10 years, until she needed someone with legal access, someone who couldn't say no. I should have reported myself then, Curtis said. I should have faced it. But I was 52 years old and I couldn't imagine losing everything I'd built. So I said thank you and pretended it never happened. I pulled out the desk chair and sat down across from him. Here's what happens next. Curtis, I said, you have 2 choices. He looked up at me, eyes red. Choice 1, I file a formal complaint with the New York State Bar tomorrow morning. I provide them with evidence of your misconduct, your involvement in this conspiracy, and your role in helping Celeste attempt to defraud me of $280 million. Your license is suspended immediately pending investigation. You likely face criminal charges for the embezzlement and the conspiracy. Your career ends in disgrace, and you spend the next several years in courtrooms instead of retirement. Curtis's breathing was shallow, rapid. That choice 2, I continued. You cooperate fully. You provide me with every document, every email, every piece of evidence related to this conspiracy. You tell me exactly what Edna's role has been, exactly how the DPOA was structured, and exactly what Celeste planned to do tonight. You self-report to the State Bar within 45 days and begin repayment of the embezzled funds. I don't file the formal complaint, but I also don't protect you. You face the consequences on your own terms with whatever dignity you can salvage. I gave him 2 options. One ended his career in disgrace. The other gave him a chance to end it on his own terms with some of his dignity left intact. It was more than he deserved. It was less than he hoped for. He took it. What do you need? Curtis asked quietly. And what Curtis was about to give me in exchange would dismantle Celeste's legal architecture from the inside, because the man who drafted the trap knows exactly where all the structural weaknesses are. Curtis sat with that untouched scotch for a long moment after I finished laying out his options. Then he set it down, straightened his tie, and told me what he was willing to do. I need 45 days, he said, voice steadier than it had been since he walked into this room, to self-report to the State Bar, to repay every cent of that $85,000 with 15 years of accumulated interest, before you file anything formal. I looked at him across the mahogany desk. You have it, but Curtis, this is your only chance. No second offers, no renegotiation. You cooperate fully, or the deal is void. I understand. Everything I said. Every document, every email, every detail of how Celeste and Edna structured this conspiracy. If I find out you held anything back, you won't, Curtis interrupted. Vernon, I'm done. I've been carrying this for 10 years, and I'm done. Whatever happens to my career, at least it'll be on my terms instead of hers. Curtis Blanchard would lose his career, his reputation, everything he'd built, and he chose to lose it on his own terms rather than hers. He pulled out his phone and opened his email app. I'll forward everything to your attorney right now. Complete set of DPOA files, all 12 pages with every revision Edna made over the past 8 weeks. Email correspondence between me, Celeste, and Edna, spanning the entire conspiracy timeline. And he paused, scrolling through his contacts. Routing numbers for the offshore account. What offshore account? The one Edna opened to receive her payment if this succeeded, Curtis said quietly. Cayman Islands, 15% of the trust value. If Celeste had gotten control of the full amount, Edna would have received $42 million. $42 million. Not a favor between friends, not help for family. A calculated business transaction with a massive financial incentive. Edna drafted everything, Curtis continued. Every clause, every contingency, every structural element of the DPOA, Celeste just signed where Edna told her to sign. Your daughter is the executor. Edna is the architect. I pulled out my phone and called Priscilla. She answered immediately. Vernon? We have our cooperating witness, I said. Curtis Blanchard. He'll be on a call with your office at 6 o'clock. Everything you need, documents, emails, account numbers. Full cooperation. I'll have the plea agreement drafted within the hour, Priscilla said. Is he there now? Right here. Put him on. I handed Curtis my phone. He took it with hands that still shook slightly but held steady enough. This is Curtis Blanchard, he said. Yes, ma'am, I understand. 6 o'clock. I'll have everything ready. He handed the phone back. I ended the call. Thank you, Curtis said quietly. Don't thank me, I said. You're not getting away with anything. You're just getting the chance to face it honestly instead of being dragged through it in handcuffs. I know, he said, but that's more than I would have given myself. Before I tell you what happened in the next 90 minutes, if you're still with me, comment A or B and add one reason in 10 words or less. A equals Curtis made the right choice, or B equals I should have turned him in immediately. Quick note. Some details ahead are adapted for storytelling impact. The lesson matters most. Curtis left the library at 5:50. I watched him walk back toward the reception terrace where guests were finishing cocktails and preparing to move inside for dinner service. He looked like a man who'd been carrying a piano on his back for a decade and had finally set it down. Between 6 o'clock and 6:30, the Lockwood estate transformed into a tactical operations center that 200 wedding guests would never see. I signed the final property owner consent form Priscilla faxed to my phone, authorizing the live VIP camera feed to be transmitted directly to 2 plainclothes detectives from the Hamptons Police Department. Priscilla called at 6:05 to confirm they were stationed at the estate perimeter with full video access. Everything you do in that room tonight is evidence, she said. Every word, every gesture, every threat. The detectives will be monitoring in real time. If things go wrong, they can be inside within 30 seconds. Understood, I said. Thane found me in the security alcove at 6:15. Projection system is synced, he reported. I can override the ballroom screen on your signal. Every file is loaded and ready. The server logs the Dubai email, the terrace recording, Curtis's cooperation agreement. Everything. Test it, I said. He pulled out his laptop, tapped a few keys. The ballroom's massive projection screen, currently displaying a slideshow of Hayes and Leora's engagement photos for dinner, guests flickered, once went dark, then displayed a single line of text, System override active. Thane tapped again. The engagement photos returned. Perfect, I said. Floyd appeared at 6:25, camera in hand. Final check on the hidden camera. Video feed is stable across all 3 angles. Audio is clean. She won't even know we're recording until it's too late. I stood in the security alcove looking at the monitors showing different angles of the estate, the terrace where guests were laughing, the ballroom where staff was setting tables, the VIP room sitting empty and waiting. Then I walked to the mirror in the adjacent washroom and looked at myself in my tuxedo. For the first time all day, I didn't see a grieving widowed father trying to protect his children from each other. I saw the man who'd built Cole Pharmaceuticals from a cramped laboratory in Queens with nothing but a patent application and stubborn refusal to quit. The man who'd survived 30 years of hostile takeover attempts, proxy fights, and boardroom wars. The man who'd learned that the most valuable skill in any negotiation is knowing exactly when to stop being reasonable. Celeste thought she was stealing from a grieving old man who'd gotten soft in retirement. She had no idea who she was actually dealing with. 30 years of boardroom warfare had taught me one unshakable truth: never underestimate an opponent who has nothing left to lose. By 6:30, every piece was in position. The only variable left was Celeste herself, and I had spent 30 years learning that the most dangerous assumption in any negotiation is that the other side will behave rationally. Rational or not, she would make her move soon, and I would be ready when she did. She found me at 7 o'clock, exactly standing at the second floor window, where Constance used to watch the ocean during parties. Celeste always did have a flair for staging. "Dad," she said, her voice warm with daughterly affection. "I've been looking for you." I turned from the window. The Atlantic stretched dark and infinite beyond the glass, the same view Constance had loved, the same view that would still be there long after tonight was over. "Just getting some air," I said. "It's been quite a day." Celeste crossed the corridor, her navy gown rustling softly. Her smile was genuine, or at least it looked genuine. Her shoulders were relaxed, her posture open. This was a woman who believed she'd already won. "I wanted to catch you before things get too hectic," she said. "Curtis prepared some trust renewal paperwork, just formalities really, but with everything that's been happening with the estate planning, we should probably handle it tonight while everyone's here." "Trust renewal," I repeated. "Standard stuff," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "Updating beneficiary language, clarifying distribution protocols. Curtis said it would take maybe 10 minutes. We can handle it after the toasts around 8 in the study upstairs." She thought my medical crisis would happen at 8. She thought I'd be confused, disoriented, vulnerable enough to sign anything she put in front of me. The confidence in her voice told me everything I needed to know. 8 o'clock works perfectly," I said. Her smile widened. "Perfect. I'll let Curtis know. You should get back to the party Hayes was asking about you." She squeezed my arm affectionately and walked back toward the ballroom, her heels clicking against the hardwood. I waited until she disappeared around the corner, then walked to the restroom at the end of the hall and locked the door. 3 encrypted texts sent in rapid succession. To Priscilla, North Wing, second door, 1955, bring everything. To Floyd, showtime at 2000. To Dr. Upshaw, confirm protocol 7. All 3 responses came back within 30 seconds. Confirmed, ready, standing by. I looked at myself in the mirror. 70 years old tuxedo, perfectly pressed boutonniere, still straight. The same face I'd seen this morning at 6, but now there was something different in the eyes. 30 years of preparation distilled into the next 60 minutes. Constance stood at this exact window in 1998, watching storm clouds over the Atlantic. "The ocean doesn't negotiate, Vernon," she'd said. "It just takes what it wants." I pocketed my phone and returned to the ballroom. Dinner service was underway. 200 guests sat at elegantly arranged tables, the reception in full swing. Hayes and Leora occupied the head table, both of them radiant with that particular newlywed glow that makes everything else fade into background noise. I took my seat at the family table, Thane on my left, Celeste 2 seats down, Edna and Curtis across from us. Celeste checked her watch, 7:32. 3 minutes later, she checked it again, 7:35. Another 3 minutes, 7:38. She was counting down, making sure the timeline held, making sure everything stayed on schedule for the 8 o'clock trap. Edna leaned toward Curtis and whispered something I couldn't hear. Curtis nodded, his hand going to his tie, adjusting it nervously. They were synchronized, coordinated, operating on the same internal clock. "Dad, you feeling all right?" Hayes asked from the head table, his voice carrying concern. "You've barely touched your plate." "And saving my appetite for what comes next," I said and smiled at him. Hayes laughed, turning back to Leora. He had no idea. None of them did except the 3 people at this table, who were counting down the minutes until they thought they'd own everything. I watched Curtis's micro-expressions, the nervous swallow, the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet mine, the slight tremor in his hands when he reached for his water glass. Curtis had flipped. He'd given me everything, but Celeste and Edna didn't know that yet. Edna sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap, the picture of elegant composure. But I'd spent 30 years reading people across negotiating tables. I saw the predatory patience in the set of her jaw, the calculation in the way she tracked Celeste's watch checking. 7:45. The ballroom chandelier, 18,000 crystals installed. The summer haze was born, cast fragments of light across the polished silver and white linens. Each refraction, a countdown. Each sparkle marking another second closer to 8 o'clock. Staff cleared the dinner plates. Dessert appeared. Coffee was poured. 7:48. Celeste's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, typed a quick response, set it down. 7:50. 10 minutes to 8. I looked across the ballroom at Floyd, positioned near the entrance with his camera. He caught my eye, gave the smallest nod. Everything ready. Thane sat beside me, calm and steady, his phone in his pocket, with the projection override app loaded and waiting. Hayes stood at the head table, tapping his champagne glass for attention. I just want to say a few words before we start the dancing. He began, his voice carrying across the ballroom. The room quieted. 200 guests turned their attention to the groom. This has been the best day of my life. Hayes set his arm around Leora's waist. And I'm grateful to everyone here for being part of it, especially my family, my brothers, my sister, my dad. Mom would have loved this. Celeste's smile never wavered. She applauded with everyone else, the perfect sister, the perfect daughter. But when Hayes sat down and the applause faded, she caught my eye across the table. And she tapped her watch, once, deliberately, with a smile that said she knew exactly what was coming in 10 minutes. She thought she was signaling my imminent collapse. She thought the tap was a countdown to my confusion, my vulnerability, my desperate signing of whatever documents she put in front of me. She had no idea I'd been reading that gesture differently. She had no idea that every watch check, every whispered coordination with Edna, every nervous glance from Curtis had been captured, documented, recorded. She had no idea that the detectives monitoring the live camera feed had been watching her count down for the past 3 hours. She had no idea what was waiting for her in that study upstairs. 10 minutes to 8. Celeste's smile widened as she tapped her watch. She thought she was counting down to my surrender. She had no idea she was marking the seconds until her own empire turned to ash. The VIP room door closed behind me at 8 o'clock, and Celeste's smile vanished as if someone had cut the power. The transformation was instant complete. The warm, daughterly affection from the corridor 30 seconds ago disappeared, replaced by something clinical and focused. She locked the door with a quiet click that seemed very loud in the silence. "Dad," she said, her voice different now, flatter, more controlled. "Have a seat." The VIP room looked exactly as it had this morning, when Floyd and Thane had installed the hidden camera, antique mahogany desk, 2 leather chairs, walls lined with law books that probably hadn't been opened in a decade. The window overlooked the garden, where guests were still celebrating 2 floors below. I remained standing. Celeste moved to the desk and placed a thick document on the polished surface. 12 pages perfectly bound, exactly as Curtis had described. "This protects your assets if your health changes," she said, her tone shifting into what I recognized as her CFO voice, the one she used in boardrooms when explaining quarterly projections. Dr. Upshaw documented some concerns about cognitive function. Nothing serious yet, but enough that we should have proper safeguards in place. What concerns Celeste? She pulled a second document from the folder, the psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Upshaw's signature at the bottom, declaring me mentally incompetent. "Episodes of confusion," she said smoothly. "Difficulty with recent memory, the kind of things that happen naturally at your age, but that require legal protections to ensure the family trust is managed properly." I looked at the document, then at her, then back at the document. I see," I said. She slid a heavy pen across the mahogany. It stopped precisely between us, an offering and an ultimatum simultaneously. "Eddie, just sign Dad," she said. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." I picked up the document and read the first page slowly. Grant of authority to Celeste Marie Lockwood. Immediate activation upon signature. Full control of all trust assets. The unsigned DPOA sat between us like every unspoken betrayal from 30 years each clause, a decade of her learning how little she thought I noticed. "You've put a lot of work into this," I said. "It's for your protection?" "Curtis drafted this," I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Curtis prepared the legal framework, yes, with Edna's consultation." I set the document down without picking up the pen. Silence filled the room. 1 minute, 2, 3. Celeste's composure began to fracture. Small tells, a tightness around her eyes, the way her fingers drummed, once against the desk, the barely perceptible shift in her weight. "Dad," she said, and now there was an edge in her voice. "I need you to sign this." "Why?" "Because I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, turned it toward me. The video showed a pharmacy counter, date stamp 3 weeks ago. The camera angle was from above security footage probably obtained through some contact she'd cultivated. And there I was, standing at the counter, talking to the pharmacist. The audio was muffled but clear enough, my voice asking if they still had Constance's prescription on file, the pharmacist's gentle response that Mrs. Lockwood had passed away 2 years ago, my confusion, my apology, my quiet exit. Celeste let it play for 15 seconds, then stopped it. I post this to the board, she said quietly, and they pull your honorary seat. I send it to the press and they write the cognitive decline story. 30 years of reputation gone in 48 hours. Or you can sign this document, ensure the trust is properly managed, and avoid all of that. She had filmed me whispering Constance's name to a pharmacist and weaponized widowhood. I looked at the phone, then at Celeste. Then I raised my eyes for precisely 1 second toward the corner molding where Floyd's camera sat invisible to anyone who didn't know it was there. Then I fixed my gaze back on my daughter. Is that all? I asked. The question landed like a stone in still water. Celeste's expression flickered confusion, then something that might have been fear. All, she repeated. Dad, you don't understand what I'm... Is that all you have? I asked again, my voice completely calm. A video of a widower asking about his wife's prescription. It shows cognitive decline. It shows you can't manage. It shows grief, I said. It shows a man who spent 38 years married to someone and occasionally forgets she's gone. That's not dementia, Celeste. That's widowhood. Her hand tightened on the phone. The board won't see it that way, she said, but her voice had lost its certainty. The board will see a daughter trying to exploit her father's grief, I said. They'll see someone who secretly recorded a private moment and tried to turn loss into leverage. I'm not signing your document, I said. The silence that followed was different from the earlier quiet. This one had weight, had consequence. Celeste stared at me, and I watched her recalculate. Watched her realize that the leverage she'd been so confident about wasn't working. Watched her understand that something had gone very wrong with her careful plan. Dad, she said, and for the first time tonight she sounded uncertain. You need to sign this. No, I said simply, I don't. She looked at the DPOA on the desk, at the pen lying untouched at me, standing immovable in front of her. What do you want? She asked finally. The truth, I said. How much debt are you carrying, Celeste? Her face went white. Her blackmail video showed a grieving husband at a pharmacy counter, asking for his dead wife's prescription because muscle memory outlasts loss. She thought she'd found dementia. I knew she'd revealed something far more dangerous. She had no idea what actual evidence looked like. The door opened without a knock at 8:18, and Edna Blanchard walked in like she'd bought the house that morning. She didn't look at me. Her eyes went straight to Celeste, and something passed between them, a signal, a confirmation, a transfer of control. Celeste, Edna said quietly, step back. Celeste's face flickered with something that might have been humiliation, might have been relief. She moved toward the window without argument. Edna turned to me, and I saw the woman who'd spent 20 years structuring billion-dollar acquisitions for investment banks. The social warmth from 11 Thanksgivings was gone. This was pure corporate predator. Vernon, she said, her voice carrying the particular precision of someone who'd spent decades in boardrooms. We're past negotiating. Edna, I said, I didn't expect you to handle this personally. Celeste needs a steadier hand. She glanced at my daughter, and the dismissal in that look was surgical. Celeste's face hardened, but she said nothing. Edna moved to the desk, picked up the DPOA, and set it back down between us with deliberate care. Here's what happens next, she said. You sign this document, or we file a contested guardianship petition Monday morning. Article 81, New York Mental Hygiene Law. The hearing will be public. Every detail of your mental health evaluation will be entered into the court record. Your grandchildren will read it. The press will cover it. And you will spend the next 6 months in depositions and psychiatric evaluations while your reputation disintegrates in real time. I looked at the woman I'd known for 11 years, the woman who'd sat at my table every Thanksgiving, who'd brought wine and stories, who'd cried at Constance's funeral. Or, Edna continued, you can sign this now quietly, and we handle the trust transition with discretion. No public hearings, no press, no courtrooms, just a smooth succession that protects everyone's dignity. Including yours, I said. Her eyes narrowed fractionally. This isn't about me. Isn't it? What's your cut? Edna 15%. 20. Something cold flickered across her face. You're confused. That's exactly what we're trying to address. 11 Thanksgivings. I'd watched Edna Blanchard carve turkey with surgical precision. I should have known she'd carve up a trust the same way. The petition is drafted, Edna said. The medical evaluation is attached. Curtis has the filing ready for Monday at 9 a.m. All that's missing is your signature on this document, which would make the petition unnecessary. And if I don't sign, then Monday morning you become a public spectacle, Edna said simply. Hayes and Leora will read about your cognitive decline in the New York Times. Thane will be deposed about incidents of confusion he's witnessed. Your grandchildren, when they're old enough to Google, you will find court records describing your mental deterioration. She paused, let that image settle. Or you can sign now and none of that happens. Celeste stood by the window watching. Her earlier confidence had returned now that Edna had taken over. This was the plan, Celeste as the face, Edna as the architect. One more thing, Edna said, her voice dropping even quieter. If you fight this in court, we'll subpoena your medical records, all of them, including the pharmacy visits, the prescriptions requested for a deceased spouse, the confused calls to doctors' offices. Every private moment of grief becomes public evidence. She had weaponized my widowhood. I looked at the DPOA sitting on the desk, 12 pages that would grant Celeste immediate control of everything I'd built over 30 years. Your grandchildren will read it, Edna repeated softly. Is that what you want Constance's legacy to be? She'd used my dead wife's name as leverage. I reached for the pen. Celeste's posture shifted relief, victory, vindication, all flooding through her at once. Edna remained perfectly still, perfectly controlled, watching. I pulled the DPOA toward me, read the signature line, Vernon William Lockwood, Principal. Priscilla had been clear 3 hours ago. A signature obtained through explicit threats is void under New York law. Every word Edna had spoken, the grandchildren and the court records Constance's name used as a weapon, was already captured on 3 cameras, feeding live to 2 detectives outside. I wasn't surrendering. I was closing the trap. The pen moved across paper like a scalpel, opening an artery controlled, deliberate, designed to bleed exactly where I wanted. My signature formed slowly, each letter clear, legible, unmistakable. No confusion, no tremor, no sign of the cognitive decline they'd fabricated. I set the pen down. Edna picked up the document, immediately checking the signature, confirming it was complete. Celeste moved from the window, looking over Edna's shoulder. For perhaps 3 seconds they examined it together. Then they exchanged the smallest glance. Victory, success, the culmination of 8 weeks of planning. Edna allowed herself the ghost of a smile. Celeste's smile was wider, less controlled. "Thank you, Dad," Celeste said, and her voice had shifted back to warmth, back to daughterly affection, now that she'd gotten what she wanted. "This is the right thing, for everyone." "We'll file this with the trustee tomorrow," Edna said, already sliding the document into her folder. "The transition will be seamless." I stood there watching them organize paperwork, watching them coordinate next steps, watching them believe they'd won. They thought I'd signed under psychological pressure. They thought the coercion had worked. They thought the threats about public hearings and grandchildren reading court records had broken my resistance. They had no idea that every word Edna had spoken, every threat, every manipulation, every use of Constance's name as leverage had been captured by 3 separate camera angles with pristine audio quality. They had no idea that 2 detectives were watching this entire confrontation in real time from a laptop parked at the estate perimeter. They had no idea that signing under explicit coercion made the document legally void, but tactically perfect. "I should get back to the reception," I said. "Of course," Edna said smoothly. "Enjoy the rest of the evening. We'll handle everything from here." I walked to the door, turned back for one final look. Celeste and Edna stood together at the desk, the fraudulent DPOA, between them victory written across both their faces. My signature dried on fraudulent paperwork, while Celeste and Edna exchanged the smallest smile of victory. They thought coercion worked better without witnesses. They had no idea I'd spent 6 months making sure every threat, every word, every breath in this room was being recorded by people who knew exactly what evidence looked like. Celeste stood at the microphone with a champagne flute raised when the projection screen cut to black and Thane pressed a single key. The ballroom had been showing engagement photos Hayes and Leora, laughing on a beach somewhere, the kind of images that make guests smile and dab their eyes. Hayes was on the dance floor with his bride, both of them swaying to music that had just gone silent. Celeste's voice carried across the sudden quiet. "To my baby brother Hayes, who taught me that love," the screen flashed to life behind her. Not engagement photos, not wedding memories. An email, subject line visible to all 200 guests. Re-patent acquisition opportunity. The sender Celeste Lockwood, the recipient Al Rashid Capital Partners Dubai. The message body filled the screen. 12 pharmaceutical patents available for immediate acquisition at 40% below current market valuation. Celeste's voice faltered. She turned to look at the screen champagne flute still raised frozen mid-toast. The image changed. Bank transfer records. Wire authorization showing Thane Lockwood's digital signature. Forensic caption overlaid in red. Digital signature stolen identity theft confirmed. Thane stood near the sound system laptop, open face, expressionless. The screen changed again. Dr. Quincy Upshaw's face appeared a video recording timestamp, showing it was made this afternoon. His voice filled the ballroom speakers. My name is Dr. Quincy Upshaw. I was coerced into signing a falsified psychiatric evaluation, declaring Vernon Lockwood mentally incompetent. Celeste Lockwood threatened to destroy my practice if I refused. Everything I signed was a lie. 200 guests sat in suffocating silence. The final image appeared on the screen. Live footage. The VIP room. 8:18 p.m., less than 30 minutes ago. Edna Blanchard's voice crystal clear. Sign it or we file the contested petition Monday. The hearing will be public. Every detail of your mental health evaluation in the record. Your grandchildren will read it. The camera showed me signing the document. Showed Celeste and Edna exchanging that small smile of victory. Celeste's face on stage went white. For perhaps 5 seconds no one moved. No one spoke. 200 people witnessing undisputed crime in real time. Then Curtis Blanchard stood up from table 8. He walked toward the stage with the careful measured steps of a man who'd already decided what he was going to lose. His wife Edna remained at their table, her face unreadable. Curtis climbed the 3 steps to the stage. Celeste backed away from him like he was contagious. He took the microphone. My name is Curtis Blanchard. He said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. I've been the Lockwood family attorney for 25 years. Tonight, I need to tell you what I helped Celeste Lockwood attempt to do to her father, and why I could not let it continue. 25 years of Thanksgiving dinners, and Curtis Blanchard chose this wedding to tell the truth. Edna, my wife, designed every step of this conspiracy, Curtis continued. The durable power of attorney, the falsified medical evaluation, the blackmail of Dr. Upshaw. I documented everything because I knew one day I would have to choose between my marriage and my conscience. Celeste's voice came out as a whisper. Curtis, what are you— I'm sorry, Curtis said, looking at her directly, but I can't let you destroy this family. Edna stood from table 8 and walked toward the ballroom exit, calm, controlled, already calculating her escape. 2 men in suits stepped into her path. Edna Blanchard. One of them said, pulling out a badge. Hampton's Police Department, we need you to stop right there. Edna's composure cracked for the first time all night. On stage, the second detective approached Celeste. Celeste Lockwood, you're under arrest for attempted grand larceny in the 1st degree, he said, pulling out handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The detective continued reading Miranda rights. New York Penal Law, Section 155.40, Section 190.65, Scheme to defraud in the 1st degree, Title 18, USC, Section 1343, Wire fraud, Section 190.80, Identity theft in the 1st degree. Celeste didn't resist, didn't argue. She stood perfectly still as the handcuffs closed around her wrists. But her eyes found mine across the ballroom. No remorse, no apology. Just calculation measuring angles, assessing damage, already planning her defense. I held her gaze until the detectives led her toward the exit. The second detective was cuffing Edna. Conspiracy to commit grand larceny, scheme to defraud. You have the right to remain silent. 200 guests watched in absolute silence as Celeste and Edna were led out of the ballroom in handcuffs. The doors closed behind them. Then the whispers started. Then the chaos. I walked out through the side entrance down the hall into the east corridor, where no one would find me. Except Hayes found me anyway. He appeared at the end of the hallway, still in his tuxedo, his face pale and devastated. Did you know? He asked. Yes, I said, I knew. How long? Long enough? He stood there, trying to process, trying to reconcile the sister who'd pinned his boutonniere this morning with the woman who'd just been arrested at his wedding reception. Why didn't you stop it earlier? He asked, voice breaking. Before tonight, before all these people? Because I needed her to choose, I said. I needed to be wrong about her. $280 million in assets, and what broke Hayes was not the money, but the sister he thought he knew. He took 2 steps toward me, then his face crumpled, and he collapsed against my shoulder, weeping like he hadn't since Constance died. A 30-year-old emergency room physician who'd seen every kind of trauma except this one. I held my son in a darkened corridor, while his sister sat in handcuffs 200 feet away, and understood that winning feels nothing like justice. The ballroom felt like a cathedral after an earthquake, 200 people frozen in their seats, the chandeliers still swaying slightly from when Edna had grabbed the doorframe on her way out in handcuffs. My daughter's champagne toast remained half-finished on the microphone stand. I walked back to the stage at 9:45, my dress shoes clicking against marble in absolute silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, and my voice sounded older than 70. "What you've witnessed tonight is the hardest thing a father can endure, but you're still here, and that matters more than you know." I pulled the envelope from my jacket, the Cole Family Trust Amendment I'd prepared 4 weeks ago, when I first understood what Celeste was planning. Floyd stood at the back near the band, giving me a barely perceptible nod. Thane sat at table 7, with his laptop still glowing, the projection screen behind me now dark. Hayes had disappeared into the corridor, where Leora had followed him. Under New York, Estates Powers and Trusts Law. Section 7-1.9, I'm executing an amendment to the Cole Family Trust in front of 200 witnesses. I broke the seal and unfolded the document. Effective immediately, the Trust's $280 million in assets will be distributed equally between my sons, Thane Edward Lockwood and Hayes Gideon Lockwood, with Floyd Curtis serving as trustee and fiduciary advisor. Someone dropped a fork. The sound rang out like a gunshot. Celeste Marie Lockwood is hereby removed as beneficiary power of attorney holder and trustee. The durable power of attorney signed 23 minutes ago under documented coercion is void. The notarization performed by Edna Blanchard, who is currently being transported to central booking on charges of conspiracy fraud and blackmail, carries no legal weight. I looked directly at the camera Floyd had repositioned, the same one that had captured Celeste's confession in the VIP room. Some debts can't be paid in money. My daughter needed $47 million. I had it ready. All she had to do was ask her father instead of trying to destroy him. The silence broke. Whispers spread through the ballroom like wind through wheat. Hayes married the love of his life tonight. I continued, and my voice cracked on my youngest son's name. That's still true. That's still worth celebrating. So I'm asking you if you can find it in yourselves. Stay. Dance. Toast the couple who did nothing wrong except have a wedding on the worst night of their lives. I folded the amendment and handed it to Floyd, who'd walked up to witness and countersign. His hands shook slightly as he pressed his signature next to mine. "It's done, Vernon," he whispered. "It's finally done." The notary Priscilla had positioned near the entrance arranged 3 days ago. One detail among 100, stepped forward without being asked, and pressed her seal to the final page. The amendment was acknowledged, witnessed, and legally binding. But I knew better. Legal victory and actual resolution live in different countries. The band leader approached the stage uncertain. A woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a violin tucked under her arm. "Mr. Lockwood," she said quietly, "what would you like us to play?" I almost said nothing. Almost told her to pack up, that we'd destroyed enough beauty for one evening. Then I saw Hayes emerge from the corridor, his face blotchy and wet, Leora's hand in his. My son looked at me across 200 people, and a chasm of fresh grief, and I understood what he was asking. "Play their first dance," I told the band leader. "Play it like nothing happened." The music started Etta James' "At Last," and I watched my youngest son walk his bride onto an empty dance floor in front of guests who'd just watched his sister get arrested. Hayes pulled Leora close, and they swayed in the center of the ballroom while 200 people held their breath. Then slowly other couples stood. Floyd led his wife onto the floor. Thane took his girlfriend's hand. One by one, the guests chose to dance instead of flee to pretend that love could survive in the same room where betrayal had just imploded. I stood at the edge of the parquet and watched Hayes rest his forehead against Leora's, his shoulders shaking with either laughter or sobs. I couldn't tell which from 20 feet away. The boy who'd called me at dawn, asking if I was okay. The physician who'd chosen healing as a profession because he'd watched his mother die and couldn't save her. The son who'd never asked me for anything except to show up. Priscilla appeared at my elbow, her courtroom armor replaced by something softer. "You gave them a choice," she said. "Stay and dance or leave, and remember this is only tragedy. That's the gift, Vernon." It doesn't feel like a gift. It's not supposed to. Resolution never feels like victory. It just feels like surviving. The song ended, and another began. Hayes kissed Leora's temple and led her off the floor, walking directly toward me. I braced myself for collapse for accusation for the bill that comes due when you save your fortune, but lose your daughter. Instead, Hayes hugged me, hard and long, right there in front of everyone. "Thank you," he whispered into my shoulder, "for not letting her win completely." He pulled back, wiped his eyes with the heel of his palm, and returned to his bride. The dance floor filled again. The bartenders resumed pouring champagne. 200 people made the collective choice to continue a celebration that had been detonated from within, not because the trauma had resolved, but because continuing was the only answer left. I walked to the French doors and stepped onto the terrace where this had all started at dawn. The rose garden glowed under landscape lighting, perfect and oblivious. My phone buzzed a text from Floyd. "County confirmed both in custody. Arraignment Monday. You should see Constance's letter before you sleep tonight. The second page. She knew Vernon, she always knew." I looked back through the glass at Hayes dancing with colleagues at Thane, quietly packing up his laptop at the guests who'd transformed my son's wedding into a masterclass in resilient grace. Then I looked at Floyd's text and understood that the hardest conversation still waited in an envelope I'd been too afraid to finish reading. Resolution doesn't arrive in one moment. It comes in waves, and the second wave was about to hit. I slipped away to the library at 11 because I needed to hear Constance's voice one more time. The guests were still dancing. Thane had driven home, but Floyd's text had mentioned page 2 of Constance's letter, the part I'd been too afraid to read this morning in the rose garden. I pulled the letter from my breast pocket where I'd carried it for 17 hours. The paper had softened from body heat. I'd read the first page at dawn, her instructions about the trust amendment, the timeline she'd projected with eerie accuracy. But the second page had felt too intimate to absorb while preparing for war. Now, with my daughter in custody and my son still standing, I unfolded it under the library's banker's lamp. "Vernon, if you're reading this, it means I was right and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't fix her. I'm sorry you have to be the one. My wife had written this 2 years ago, 18 months before she died. Constance had known then what I'd refused to see, that our daughter had already chosen a path that would end here. I tried for 36 years. Every therapist, every intervention, every second chance. She's brilliant and broken, and I don't know which came first. But Thane and Hayes need a father who tells the truth more than they need a sister who doesn't. You always knew when to let go. Trust yourself." I set the letter on the desk and pressed my palms against mahogany that had belonged to my grandfather. Constance had given me permission in ink before she ever knew about Edna Blanchard or the forged power of attorney. She'd seen the shape of tonight even when the details were still forming. "I love you, Constance." 3 words at the bottom. No explanation, no qualification. Just the foundation that had held for 43 years. I refolded the letter and returned it to my breast pocket over my heart, where it would stay permanently. Constance died 2 years ago, knowing what I would face tonight, and she'd left me permission in ink. The library door opened quietly. Floyd stood in the threshold, his tie loosened, and his camera bag still over one shoulder. "I thought I'd find you here," he said. I gestured to the chair across from the desk. Floyd settled into it with the comfortable silence of someone who'd earned the right not to fill every pause. "You didn't have to make me trustee Vernon," he finally said. 8 years ago, you sat in a hospital waiting room for 4 days, when Thane had that motorcycle accident, and we didn't know if he'd walk again. You brought coffee and never asked if I needed you there. That's the kind of person I want, watching over my boys." Floyd looked at his hands. "That's not the same as managing $280 million. It's exactly the same. Trustee work isn't about the money. It's about showing up when things fall apart." He nodded slowly. "The boys know. Thane does. I'll tell Hayes tomorrow. And Celeste's share, gone, distributed to her brothers. She'll face charges on an income that's now exactly 0. Floyd winced but didn't argue. He understood that some betrayals sever the bonds that money symbolizes. "Come on," he said, standing. "You've been inside too long." I followed him through the French doors onto the east terrace. The Atlantic stretched black and infinite beyond the railing waves, audible but invisible. The ballroom glowed behind us, music drifting through open windows. Constance used to watch this ocean from the second-floor bedroom, I said. Every morning for the last 6 months. She told me once that the hardest part of dying was knowing which people she had to leave behind and which ones would be fine. She knew you'd be fine. She knew I'd survive. That's different. Floyd pulled his camera from the bag, the same Leica he'd carried for 30 years. He raised it slowly, the lens pointed at me standing against the terrace railing with the dark ocean behind, and the lit ballroom to my left. I didn't pose, didn't straighten my tie or fix my expression, just stood there feeling every one of my 70 years. The shutter clicked. "Good shot," I asked, not turning. "Honest shot," Floyd said quietly. He lowered the camera and stood beside me at the railing. Below us, waves hit the private beach in rhythms older than money or family or betrayal. "You know what the difference is between an employee and a trustee?" Floyd asked. "Tell me." "An employee manages assets. A trustee protects people. You just gave me the second job, Vernon. That means something." "I know what it means. That's why I gave it to you." He smiled, a small, real thing in the darkness. "Then I'll do it right." We stood in silence while the music changed inside. Hayes's laughter carried through the open doors, clear and surprising. My youngest son dancing at his own wedding 4 hours after watching his sister arrested, choosing life because the alternative was choosing nothing. Floyd raised the camera one more time, but this time he turned it toward the ballroom, capturing Hayes and Leora, mid-spin under crystal chandeliers. Then he lowered it and packed it away. "That's the photograph you'll want someday," he said. "Not the one of you looking broken, the one where Hayes kept dancing. Keep both," I told him. "The truth is usually in the pair." Floyd nodded and turned toward the French doors. "I'm heading out. You should sleep, Vernon. Monday's arraignment is going to be ugly." "I know." He paused at the threshold. "She's still your daughter." "I know that too." He disappeared inside, leaving me alone with the Atlantic and Constance's letter folded over my heart. Somewhere in county lockup, Celeste was learning what cells looked like from the inside. Somewhere in the ballroom, my sons were learning how to stand upright when the foundation cracks. Floyd's shutter had clicked and caught something I couldn't have posed a 70-year-old man who just destroyed his daughter to save his sons, standing alone with his dead wife's wisdom folded over his heart. The photograph would never hang in any gallery, but it was the only honest record of what winning actually cost. Hayes appeared at 11:45, with Leora's hand in one of his and Thane's arm in the other. "One dance, Dad," he said, "for Mom." The ballroom had emptied to maybe 40 guests, the band packing instruments' chandeliers dimmed to half power. The band leader saw us and signaled her musicians. They unpacked one violin, one cello, Constance's song, the one from our wedding, 38 years ago. We formed a loose circle on the parquet, the four of us. Thane's hand on my shoulder, Hayes holding Leora close, me standing where Constance should have been. I closed my eyes and waited for some mystical presence, some sign she was watching. But there was only music and my sons breathing beside me, and the profound reality that when you love someone deeply enough, they don't depart. They integrate into the way you stand, the way you find your bearings, when there's no one left to ask. "She would have hated tonight," Thane said quietly, "and she would have been proud of you anyway." I opened my eyes. My middle son, the technology officer who'd projected evidence to 200 witnesses. "Your mother knew 2 years ago what this night would cost," I told him. "She wrote me permission to do it anyway." The song ended. Hayes hugged me once more, shorter than before, steadier. "Get some sleep, Dad," he whispered. "You look like you aged a decade." "Only feels like 2, I said. They left together, the three of them, Leora's white dress glowing under dimmed chandeliers. I watched them go and understood that reconstituting a family means accepting the shape that remains, not mourning the piece that chose to leave. The last guest departed at 11:50. I stood on the entrance steps watching taillights disappear down the private drive, the Atlantic crashing invisible below. Floyd had left earlier. Priscilla had driven home. The estate belonged to silence and aftermath. Midnight struck a church bell from town 4 miles inland. Celeste's deadline. The moment when her forged power of attorney would have activated. The Cole Family Trust remained under my dominion. $280 million, 12 patents. Manhattan real estate, the Montana ranch. More valuable, 2 sons who knew the truth, a daughter-in-law who'd proven herself and Floyd's debt finally repaid. I pulled the notebook from my jacket, 23 days of contingency plans, legal strategies, timeline projections, every move I'd made, every counter I'd prepared. I tore out the first page and released it to the ocean breeze, then the second, then the third. The notebook pages scattered toward the Atlantic, like all the contingency plans I'd never need again, 23 days of tactical precision disappearing into salt air. By 12:07, my hands were empty. I walked inside, locked the French doors, and climbed to the bedroom where Constance had died 2 years ago, and I'd slept alone ever since. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and headlines. Tonight, I needed sleep. I woke at 6 a.m., same time, same room, same ocean view. Everything different, nothing moved. The particular cruelty of aftermath is that furniture doesn't rearrange itself to acknowledge what's changed. I made bad coffee and walked out to the front porch. I sat in the wicker chair where Constance used to read novels on Sunday mornings. The sun rose over the Atlantic in the same indifferent way it had yesterday and would tomorrow. Floyd's truck appeared in the drive at 6:15. He climbed out with 2 coffees from town and his camera bag. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. "I slept fine. Thought you might want better coffee than whatever you made in there." He was right. I took the cup and tasted civilization. Floyd sat beside me and pulled out his phone. He scrolled for a moment, then handed it to me. "Good picture. The photograph from last night, me on the East Terrace backlit by ballroom glow, facing the black Atlantic with Constance's letter in my breast pocket and my daughter in handcuffs 200 feet behind me." "Honest picture," I said. I studied it, looked 1 year older, and felt 2 decades lighter. The arithmetic of letting go never balances on paper. My jacket rumpled tie, crooked posture of a man who'd won every tactical battle and paid the strategic price anyway. "You want me to delete it?" Floyd asked. "No, keep it. 20 years from now, when Thane asks what this night actually cost, show him that." Floyd nodded and pocketed the phone. We sat drinking coffee while the sun climbed higher, and the ocean continued its eternal work of demonstrating that everything ends and nothing stops. "The lawyers called," Floyd said eventually. "Arraignment's Monday at 9. They're charging her with conspiracy fraud, attempted theft, coercion, federal and state. Edna's facing 20 years minimum. And Celeste, depends on what she admits, whether she turns on Edna or protects her." He paused. "She's still your daughter, Vernon." "I know, that's why this hurts." Floyd finished his coffee and stood. "I'll see you Monday, courtroom 7B, don't be late." "I'm never late." He walked to his truck, paused with one hand on the door. "You did the right thing. Constance knew it. Your boys know it. Eventually you'll know it too." Then he drove away, leaving me alone with bad coffee and an honest photograph, and the sun rising over the same Atlantic that had witnessed 38 years of Constance and 1 night of Celeste. The coffee was terrible, and the photograph was honest. I sat with the weight of what I'd done and the clarity of why I'd done it. The lawyers would take months. The headlines would take days. Celeste would make her choices. But that morning, with bad coffee and a good photograph, I finally understood what Constance had always known: the most valuable thing in any estate isn't what you leave behind. It's who you trust to protect it. Some battles choose you. The only variable is whether you're ready when they arrive. And to you listening to my story, remember this: the hardest battles are the ones fought inside your own home. I spent 40 years building a legacy for my children, believing that wealth and security would protect them from the world. I was wrong. The real protection came from teaching them truth, integrity, and accountability. I wish I'd understood sooner that giving Celeste everything she asked for didn't prepare her to face the moment when she couldn't have what she wanted. That was my failure as a father, and I carry it still. Family betrayal is the deepest wound because it comes from the people who were supposed to stand beside you. When your own child turns against you, every memory fractures. You wonder if any of it was real. But I've learned that protecting the ones who still choose truth is not the same as abandoning the one who chose lies. Some doors close because they have to. I believe God allows certain fractures so we can finally see who we're meant to protect and who we've been enabling. The hardest love is the kind that says no. If this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever faced family betrayal? How did you protect yourself and the people who still needed you? And if you believe these stories matter, please subscribe to Revenge Dad. Your support helps me keep sharing these lessons. Thank you for staying until the very end. I read every comment, and your perspectives mean more than you know. One last note: while this story contains fictionalized elements for reflection and storytelling, the lessons about family betrayal and difficult choices are real. I'm grateful you were here.